Chapter 8:22. Once the power in one's hands grew, one's private interests and desires would also grow. Would the royal family be able to guarantee fairness and impartiality? Would every generation of emperors serve the country and the people? Who could guarantee that this would prevent land annexation? For their own selfish interests, people's brains would become quite smart. Even the Federation's sky brain was amazed by this kind of intelligence. The landlord class would always make a comeback with another identity. What would they do then? Jiang Pingji let out a long sigh. There were still many things to consider. Wei Ci, on the other hand, was relaxed. He had thrown such a big problem to her and refused to stay to continue the discussion. It would be good to stay and have a meal together. Elsewhere, Wei Ci returned home with a belly full of thoughts. He happened to run into Zhang Ping, who was looking for him. Shiheng has caused me to suffer this time, Wei Ci smiled bitterly. Zhang Ping was a classic example of a bad teammate. This time he was really screwed over. However, so be it. At least he could temporarily stay away from the center of power in Wanzhou. When Wei Ci thought of Jiang Pingji's actions just now, he felt even more uneasy. He did not understand. What did she want to do? Although he did not understand, Wei Ci felt that it was not wrong for the two of them to distance themselves for a while. This will not happen again. Zhang Ping smiled awkwardly. Fortunately, Wei Ci was just grumbling and not angry. After all, the two of them had been close friends for many years. Screwing over once or twice was just to cultivate their relationship. Zixiao, I'll do it this time. Next time, I won't drag you down. Zhang Ping was there to collect the drawings. With the drawings as a specimen, he could have a deeper understanding. Wei Ci secretly rolled his eyes. He did not believe in Zhang Ping's attributes at all. Previously, Zhang Ping had said that Wei Ci was knowledgeable and multi-talented. Not only did he dabble in the 5 elements and 8 trigrams, Qimenduanjia, but he also worked on architectural design. He was good at calligraphy and painting, and he knew everything. Zhang Ping was not bragging. Wei Ci really knew these things. His level of attainment was not low. If not, Master Yuanjing would not have pestered him for so many years. Wei Ci went to the study to retrieve a few scrolls of drawings. The paper used was the best bamboo paper. Bamboo paper? Zixiao, did you draw this? Zhang Ping noticed that Wei Ci was holding a huge piece of silk cloth with patterns drawn on it, as well as an exquisite framed picture scroll. The original drawing is on the silk cloth. The previous owner did not preserve it well and insects grew on it. I almost couldn't tell what it looked like. Wei Ci's drawings were taken from the ancestral home of the Wei family in Langya. Even though the Wei family had fallen from grace, their ancestors were once illustrious. Naturally, they did not lack good things. Look, no matter how much I preserve it, it can't be restored to its original state. I might as well make a copy of the original drawing. You can just look at the sample. Zhang Ping made an "oh" sound and unfolded the large stack of paintings that Wei Ci had carefully stored. The paper of these scrolls had obviously been carefully cut. They were of different lengths and widths. Some were 8 or 9 inches, while others were more than 10 inches. Most of the cities in the blueprint were built during the golden age of the Great Xia dynasty. Be it the layout or the architecture, they were all majestic. Most of these buildings were uniaxial symmetrical, which perfectly satisfied the obsessive-compulsive disorder. Of course, it was easy to get lost in such a city. The more complicated ones, such as the capital cities and prefectures, mostly used symmetrical secondary tests, and the chances of getting lost were higher. Apart from these mainstream designs, there were also quite a few irregular designs. Most of them evolved from the gradual expansion of villages. With the materials, Zhang Ping felt a little more confident in his heart. At this moment, Wei Ci opened his mouth and interrupted his inspiration. Shangjing suffered an earthquake, and the terrain has undergone a huge change. If we follow the book and imitate it, I'm afraid it won't work. Jiang Pingji said calmly, "This is the original design of Shangjing. The buildings are scattered in picturesque disorder, and they are indeed majestic and beautiful. But you have to think about our Lord's temperament. She won't spend too much money to build such a luxurious prefectures for herself. Zhang Ping respected Wei Si's opinion very much. He asked, "Easy Xiao, what do you mean?" Wei Si thought about it and said, "Make it as simple as possible. Make it as convenient as possible. There's no need to deliberately pursue symmetry and beauty. As long as it suits the terrain and reduces manpower, it's fine." Of course, although it said that building a house is simple, it doesn't mean that the materials used are random. It's only been a few years since the earthquake in Shangjing. The people still have lingering fears when they think about it. The house would rather be simple, but it has to be stable. Zhang Ping thought about it and it seemed to make sense. He had followed Jiang Pingji for a period of time. She indeed did not like to be extravagant. Her style was capable and simple. If the city was built according to the model map, it would take a lot of manpower and time. Let's not talk about the distant cities. Let's talk about what used to be Shangjing City. This city took 160,000 people a whole 8 years to build. It was majestic and beautiful, but it was a waste of money, manpower, and time. If Zhang Ping dared to present such a plan to Jiang Pingji, he would definitely be taught a lesson. First, build mud houses and plan the streets of the city. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It just needs to be able to shelter from the sun and the moon, and protect against the wind and rain. Zhang Ping was speechless. He was wrong. He thought that his lord's copy and paste was child's play. He did not expect that the real child's play was Wei Si. Wouldn't that kind of house be a disgrace to my lord's status? If there was a table, Zhang Ping would slap it loudly. Wei Si smiled and said, "Fame is a worldly possession. It's unimportant. My lord won't care about this." Zhang Ping could not help but secretly criticize him. "Do you think you're my lord? How can you know what she's thinking?" For many people, houses and clothes are their pride. If it's too simple and crude, where can they put their pride? Of course, Zhang Ping did not dare to say these words out loud. If he accidentally angered his friends, Wei Si would just leave such a huge project on him. Zhang Ping would cry until he was blind. Most houses in ancient times were made of wood. It was unknown how much wood was used to build a mansion. It was fine if there were many trees around, but if there were none, they could only travel far away to buy them. It was a waste of time and energy. Fortunately, with the green bricks and green tiles, the amount of wood needed for houses was greatly reduced. Even so, it was still an astronomical figure. Zhang Ping hoped to use local materials so that they could save a lot of transportation costs. However, Jiang Pingji calculated the approximate figure and frowned quietly. There are indeed many forests in Shangjing, but if too many trees are cut down, it's easy to cause landslides and cracks. When she said that, Zhang Ping was shocked. Was it that scary? In the past, he had heard that when the mountain god was angry, the mountain would collapse and the sand would roll down when thunderstorms occurred. But were the two related? Let's do it this way. We'll use local materials for 30% of the wood. For every tree we cut down, we must plant 3 saplings. The remaining 70% of the wood will be purchased from the nearby Shangyang County. The gentry families in Shangyang County also deal in wood. They can't ask for more than such a big business. Let Xiaoyu discuss this matter. As for the green bricks and green tiles, I'll write a warrant for you. You can pick a few skilled brickmakers. Chapter 8:23. Lingshao Hall in the Heavens and Shangyang Palace in the Mortal World. Shangyang Palace was not only the palace of Dongqing, but also the place where the rich and powerful gathered. Back then, Shangjing City and Shangyang Palace were so prosperous. Now there are only ruins. There seems to be people in the distance? Wei Si lifted the curtain and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He looked at the ruins in front of him that were overgrown with weeds and vines. He was filled with emotion. It was already midsummer. The scorching sun hung high above their heads, scorching their skin. No matter what, it is Shangjing, a treasured place where the rich and powerful gathered. When the earthquake happened suddenly, many houses collapsed and were buried in the ruins. Refugees gathered here, searching for money under the ruins to make a living. Therefore, scattered villages slowly formed around it. Zhang Ping was dressed in a brown sackcloth and his long hair was tied up with a cloth. If it was not for his scholarly aura, One might think he was an ordinary farmer. He took a bamboo hat from the carriage and gave it to Wei Ci to shade him from the sun. Let's investigate first and then make a decision. Xianxia City used to have a floating population of 200,000 to 300,000, but now it had become ruins where no one could be seen. In just over 2 years, wildly growing vines covered the ruins. Occasionally, a few rats could be seen shuttling around. Wei Ci and Zhang Ping brought over 10,000 laborers. The remaining manpower was planned to be recruited locally, taking the opportunity to absorb refugees and reduce hidden dangers. The two spent a few days walking around Xianxia City and the nearby mountains, familiarizing themselves with the surrounding terrain and replanning the layout of the city. Wei Ci's memory was excellent and he had a photographic memory. In just a few days, he memorized the surrounding terrain and drew them on paper. After some discussion, the two compared the original layout of Xianxia City and made some improvements and adjustments to the layout of the state capital. I really wonder if there is anything in this world that you can't do. Zhang Ping came back from outside. His exposed cheeks and neck were scorched black and red by the scorching sun. His clothes were soaked in sweat, dry and wet, wet and dry again. After a busy day outside, Zhang Ping was so thirsty that his throat was about to emit smoke. When he returned, he gulped down a mouthful of water. He saw a huge piece of bamboo paper on Wei Ci's table. On it, a plan of a city was drawn with fine charcoal. As for why Wei Ci wanted to use the trimmed charcoal to draw, Zhang Ping did not ask since Wei Ci answered so quickly. There is a limit to one's strength, and the will of the heavens cannot be changed. Ci is just an ordinary person, there are still many things that I don't know how to do. Wei Ci smiled as he carefully rolled up the finished product and put it away. He took out another roll of paper from the side and slowly unrolled it. Compared to the previous drawing that seemed to be drawn with a ruler, this drawing was much more casual. These are the villages, mountains, and forests near the old site of Xianxia City. The soil in these places is quite sticky and suitable for making green bricks. There are also villages gathered nearby, and they add up to 1,000 people. We will recruit the people nearby and have them build a direct road to Xianxia. The amount of wood, stone, and sand needed to build the city is huge. We can't just use them in one place. The materials used to build the city weren't expensive, but the transportation costs were. Wei Ci calculated carefully and decided to spend manpower to build the main road first. Once everything was ready, he would start building the city. As big as Xianxia was, the ruins of the entire city still had to be carefully cleared out. Those that could be reused would be reused to save costs, and those that could not be reused would be disposed of. Zhang Ping casually waved his hand and said, "You can decide." Wei Ci's expression froze, and he looked at Zhang Ping with some hidden bitterness. People like Zhang Ping were described as pig-headed teammates. Under the scorching sun, Zhang Ping and the others were sweating profusely. Their immediate superior, Jiang Pingji, was holding a watermelon and chatting with Cheng Cheng. The watermelon production was limited, and most of it was supplied to meritorious subordinates. The rest was thrown to the guest house and sold to the customers. With Jiang Pingji's support, the official restaurant, the guest house, had been opened all over Wanzhou. There was one in every county in the territory. With new dishes and management methods, it quickly gained a foothold in the local area. According to Jiang Pingji's instructions, the guest house took the medium to high-end route. The recipes of ordinary home-cooked dishes were released to the people for free, so that the guest house wouldn't clash with the restaurants opened by the people and steal their rice bowls. The more guest houses opened, the more jobs they could provide, and the more disabled soldiers or the relatives of the deceased could be settled. When had the people ever seen such a novel fruit as watermelon? For a while, the business of the guest houses improved a lot, and the daily net profits were constantly rising. Jiang Pengji ate the watermelon while looking at the accounts sent by the various guest houses. The guest house's business is good, but the profits aren't good. Cheng Cheng's wife was in charge of the internal affairs. She didn't know much about the business, but she knew that the restaurant didn't make much money. Jiang Pengji looked at the accounts and felt a little satisfied. The managers of the guest houses were smart enough not to cheat on the accounts, so it didn't take her long to finish reading. How can a big city like Guangzhou rely on the guest house's business to maintain its expenses? It doesn't matter how much profit it makes. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, the guest house was established to give the disabled soldiers a place to go, and the orphans and parents of the deceased a place to rely on. It doesn't matter if it makes money or not, what's important is that it can reassure the people. When the soldiers see that their families are properly settled, they can also rest assured on the battlefield. If we don't settle them down properly, first, it will chill the hearts of the soldiers, and second, it will force these people from good citizens to become refugees. Mr. Cheng is more knowledgeable than me, so you should know what kind of situation it will be when there are more refugees. How many bandits were born as refugees? What was the difference between refugees and refugees in ancient times? Wherever there were more refugees, social security would be poor, and crimes would occur every few days. Stealing and fighting were considered minor, but what was scary was breaking into houses to rob, kill women and children. Such cases were not uncommon. Why was Guangzhou stable? It wasn't because the number of refugees had decreased, but because more and more refugees had been granted amnesty and returned to their homes and fields. Cheng Cheng listened to Jiang Pingji's words and thought for a while, then an idea flashed in his mind. He said, is it possible that the governor built the provincial government for this reason? Cheng Cheng originally thought that Jiang Pingji spent money to build the provincial government for her own enjoyment, but later felt that it was unlikely. Now that he heard her say this, Cheng Cheng suddenly understood. Spending a huge amount of money to build the provincial government was secondary. The real purpose was to provide a large number of jobs and attract refugees to work there. In the minds of many people, forced labor was free physical labor that could easily lead to death, so no one was willing to do it. But Jiang Pingji had set a precedent by using paid labor to attract people to work there. Chapter 8:24. Cheng Cheng calculated silently in his heart. He had to admit that the young governor in front of him was really good at accounting. In the eyes of outsiders, labor was free, but Jiang Pingji paid the workers. That was a stupid move. Was that the truth? Cheng Cheng didn't think so. Jiang Pingji seemed to be at a disadvantage, but she was actually taking advantage of everything. Young people nowadays are really shameful. Cheng Cheng sighed. The girl in front of him was a few years younger than his youngest son, but she was ahead of everyone else. Jiang Pingji said humbly, "You flatter me, Mr. Cheng. I still have a lot of things I don't understand and need your guidance." Cheng Cheng smiled and waved his hand. "I'm old and useless. I only hope that I can live the rest of my life in peace." Jiang Pingji smiled and said nothing, but she snorted coldly in her heart. If Cheng Cheng was the kind of person who preferred stability, he wouldn't be so troublesome. Speaking of troublemakers, the person in front of her was also a troublemaker. What was Cheng Cheng doing? This person spent a lot of time and finally came up with a way to use different patterns to punctuate sentences. In fact, most scholars had their own habits of reading sentences, and they often used small symbols that they were used to mark sentences. On this basis, Cheng Cheng proposed to use a unified symbol to punctuate sentences. At present, he was worried about what pattern to use. Since it was a symbol used to punctuate sentences, the symbol naturally couldn't be too complicated, but it couldn't be without a symbol. He scratched his head and thought of several patterns, but he was not satisfied with them, so he looked for Jiang Pingji and asked her to give him some suggestions. Seeing the pattern that Cheng Cheng sent, the audience in the streaming room exploded before Jiang Pingji could come up with any ideas. Eugene Xiang, oh my God, is this the ancient version of punctuation? But other than the dot and circle, I can't recognize anything else. Cheng Cheng gave a variety of symbol designs. The simpler ones, such as solid black dot and hollow circle, and the more complicated ones were similar to the Oracle bone script. The former was considered simple, but the latter was cumbersome and complicated. Jiang Pingji looked at it carefully, but she still felt that the patterns were too complicated and not concise. She was straightforward. Cheng Cheng heaved a long sigh and said, "It's indeed complicated. If it's used for writing, it looks gaudy and affects the beauty of the paper. Some of the diagrams are too large, and they are not simple to use. This matter is really worrying." Cheng Cheng was extremely worried, and the audience in the live broadcast room suddenly became excited. They felt that punctuation could be used. If they could see familiar punctuation in the live broadcast room, they would feel a sense of accomplishment. Li Wushuang, streamer, let me introduce something good to you. Our punctuation marks here are pretty good. The audience in the streaming room was enthusiastic, and Jiang Pingji had the same intention. She took out a new piece of paper and pretended to think for a moment. Then she picked up a pen and drew a dot and a line. Cheng Cheng looked at it carefully. What is the meaning of this, my lord? I thought that the words we learned today are made up of dots and lines. Since you want to create symbols to punctuate sentences, why don't you evolve it on this basis? Jiang Pingji drew and wrote at the same time. Cheng Cheng's eyes gradually lit up, as if he had received great inspiration. According to what my lord said, a dot and a line can be used. Cheng Cheng thought about it and drew a small circle on the paper with a pen. It was a full stop that the audience was familiar with. Such a small circle is concise and clear. If the blank space in the middle is painted, it will look different. Jiang Pingji said with a smile, exactly. You can also add a stroke to the black dot. It's also simple and easy to remember. She drew a comma. The black dot had a tail hanging from it, and it looked like a tadpole. The pattern was not big, and the image was concise and to the point. It was indeed easier to remember than the pattern that Cheng Cheng had just come up with. Cheng Cheng was suddenly enlightened. Inspiration swarmed in, and he hurriedly extended his creation on this basis. Jiang Pingji guided him from the side, and in a short while, she came up with a few basic symbols. Every time one was added, the bullet screen in the live broadcast room became lively as if it was a festival. They did not witness the birth of the symbol, but they witnessed the entire process of the symbol growing from nothing to something in another dimension. It was a great sense of accomplishment. The person who was more excited than the audience in the live broadcast room was Cheng Cheng. The pattern in front of him was very simple, but in his eyes, it was a rare treasure. With symbols, it was natural to give these symbols meaning. Jiang Pingji pointed at the full stop and said, "A circle is a circle. Why don't you use this pattern to end it?" Cheng Cheng nodded and immediately made a mark near the full stop. He pointed at the comma and said, "According to what my lord said, this symbol has the intention of extending. Why don't you use it to stop?" Jiang Pingji agreed with Cheng Cheng's suggestion. After all, the comma was originally used to stop sentences. After discussing for the whole afternoon, Cheng Cheng's spirits were still high. His eyes were shining. When Cheng Cheng returned home, not to mention his wife, even his youngest son and daughter could see the joy on their father's face. "Father, what good thing happened to you? Why are you so happy?" Cheng Yuan had been tired all day in the government office. He felt that his arm did not belong to him. He did not know why his father was so happy. There were so many things happening in Wanzhou that it was scary. When Cheng Yuan was buried by the documents, he also felt a little remorseful. Why did he walk right into the trap? Cheng Cheng smiled and stroked his beard. He said, "Naturally, it's because there's been progress on the sentence reading." Really? Cheng Yuan knew why his father had been worried recently. Because of this, he had not been able to sleep well all night. Now that there was a breakthrough, as his son, Cheng Yuan was naturally happy for his father from the bottom of his heart. Of course it's true. Cheng Cheng glanced at his son and said with some disdain, "There's no end to learning. You have to work hard." In the beginning, Cheng Cheng was quite satisfied with the knowledge of his two sons, but compared to Jiang Pingji, he felt that he despised everything. Cheng Yuan could be said to be extremely innocent after being suddenly lectured by his father. He had not been slacking off recently. Why did his father suddenly give him a warning? At the same time, the city gate had been locked, but a large group of carriages arrived outside the city. They thought that it was a passing caravan that would soon turn to another place to spend the night and enter the city at dawn. Who knew that the other party would stand outside the city in a daze and have no intention of moving? The soldiers guarding the city felt that something was wrong and sent someone down to inquire. Where are you from?" "We're from out of town. We're here to seek refuge with our relatives." The person who replied was a servant dressed as a child. Although he spoke in Dongqing's official language, his pronunciation was stiff and it was a little difficult to listen to. When the soldier heard the other party's accent, his brows furrowed fiercely. His tone was a little forceful, and he bluntly chased them away. Now that the city gate has been locked, if you want to enter the city, come back tomorrow. The servant smiled apologetically and handed over a money pouch filled with broken silver. Brother, please don't be angry. It's late at night and it's really not suitable to sleep in the wild. Why don't you do us a favor and help us pass a message to our master's relative to come out? The soldier did not dare to accept these benefits. The higher-ups were very strict in this regard. He roughly pushed the money pouch back and asked casually, "Who is your master's relative?" Chapter 825. Commandant Li? The soldier guarding the city glanced suspiciously at the servant and the carriages behind him. His heart wavered and he said hesitantly, "I've never heard of Commandant Li having any relatives. Wait here for a while, I'll send someone to inform the commandant." Hearing the first sentence, the servant thought that he would be denied entry. He didn't expect the soldier to be reasonable and be willing to help run this errand. He bowed gratefully and thanked him sincerely. "Thank you, big brother." The city guard snorted softly and accepted the other party's bow. "Wait here, Commandant Li isn't someone ordinary people can meet. If you want to pass on the news, you'll have to wait for a while." The soldier guarding the city said the ugly part first to prevent unnecessary misunderstandings. The servant hurriedly said, it's all right. As long as we can meet the general, it's all right to wait a while longer." The city guarding work wasn't under Li Yun's jurisdiction. The soldier guarding the city could only pass on the news one level at a time. There was a long detour in the middle. By the time Li Yun received the news, he had already slept for a while. Relatives? As a martial artist, Li Yun had always maintained the habit of sleeping lightly. He would wake up the moment there was movement outside. When he heard someone pass on the news that his relatives were outside the city, he was stunned. He thought he was dreaming. Where did his relatives come from? Li Yun's reaction was misunderstood by his subordinate. He said angrily, "Could it be that the people below are making fun of me? What time was it now?" It was indeed a little too much to come in the middle of the night to make people sleep well. Hearing his subordinate's words, Li Yun waved his hand and got up to take down his outer robe from the clothes rack. He casually said, "Let's go take a look." The subordinate was stunned. Could it be that the people outside the city were really Commandant Li's relatives? It was already the middle of the night. Other than the patrolling guards, there was almost no one else. Li Yun rode his horse towards the city gate. When the soldier guarding the city saw Li Yun, he suppressed the excitement in his heart and bowed in fear and trepidation. Although Li Yun was a young lad, he was good-looking and good at fighting. His future was limitless. To these soldiers, they were Li Yun's fans, and Li Yun was their idol. Who wouldn't be excited to be able to talk to their idol face to face after staying at the city gate and enduring the wind and rain? Li Yun suddenly jumped off the horse and flung the reins. With a cold expression, he asked, "Where is he?" Jiang Pengji and the others wanted Li Yun to be a man of few words in front of outsiders. This was the only way to maintain his dignified demeanor. Li Yun deeply felt that he was right. Normally, he restrained his impulse to speak and gradually established a quiet and aloof public image. The guard hurriedly caught up with Li Yun and bowed slightly. He said respectfully, "Those people are still waiting outside the city." Li Yun took out his token and ordered, "Open the city gates." The tall and heavy city gate opened up to the width of a person, and dim candlelights seeped through the gap. Li Yun's shadow was elongated, casting a shadow on the ground. Not far away, a servant dressed as a child was looking around. When he saw Li Yun appear, his eyes lit up. His appearance, demeanor, stature. If he was thrown into a crowd, he would be the center of attention. This person was definitely the one he was looking for. To ensure Li Yun's safety, there was a troop of soldiers behind him. The servant hurried forward, but unexpectedly, he was stopped by the guards. Li Yun waved his hand and said, "No matter, let him come forward to talk." The servant felt as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water on his head. His agitated emotions calmed down a lot. Li Yun asked him, You said that your master is my relative? At the same time, Li Yun sized up the servant. Although he was a servant, his attire was better than that of a commoner from a wealthy family. Li Yun did not remember having such a distinguished relative. He and his honored master depended on each other on the mountain. He had not even seen his adoptive parents in name a few times. How could he be a relative? The servant was about to speak when he heard a cold snort. The voice was not loud, but it was very clear, as if it was ringing in his ear. When Li Yun heard this voice, his first reaction was, "This person is a master of internal martial arts." His second reaction was that he was so moved that he almost cried. "I haven't seen you for more than 2 years. My disciple is so impressive." It was clearly a reprimand, but there was an indescribable pampering and joy in the voice. Li Yun was so excited that he almost forgot to speak. It was only when Xie Qian finished speaking and alighted from the carriage that he came to his senses. He saw Li Yun stride forward and kneel on the ground with a thud. He bowed and said, "Master, your disciple is unfilial. I was unable to welcome you from afar." The person who came was none other than Li Yun's honored master, Xie Qian. When Xie Qian failed to assassinate the Zhongzhou empress, he dragged his good friend, the great scholar of Zhongzhou, Wang Lin, and fled for his life. Relying on his rich experience, Xie Qian and his men avoided the imperial notice posted by the Zhongzhou imperial family and left Zhongzhou without a hitch. Just as the war in Qinzhou was heating up, Xie Qian was worried that he would be dragged into the battlefield. He had no choice but to take a detour and head straight for Wanzhou. He asked around and found out where Li Yun was staying. Unfortunately, by the time he rushed out of the city gates had long been locked. "Get up. How old are you now? If outsiders see you crying, it will damage your reputation." Xie Qian bent down and helped Li Yun up. With the light from the torch, the bystanders noticed that Li Yun and Xie Qian's side profile was rather similar. Li Yun was young and his face still looked immature. However, after several battles, he already had the demeanor of a general. Xie Qian was mature and steady. His face was angular and slightly weathered. His eyes were as calm as a pool of stagnant water, which added to his charm. As long as one wasn't blind, 9 out of 10 people would guess that the two of them were related by blood if they stood together. Li Yun sniffled. When he came to his senses, he revealed a bashful expression. Only then did he realize that he was being watched. At this moment, Li Yun noticed an unfamiliar middle-aged man standing next to his master. His temples were dyed with a few strands of gray, but he had a scholarly air about him. He had a strong smell of ink. Li Yun had only seen such an air in a few teachers. It was obvious that this middle-aged man wasn't an ordinary person. His family background was certainly not bad. The middle-aged man was the great scholar of Zhongzhou, Wang Lin. His courtesy name was Changjai. He sized up Li Yun. Li Yun even obediently bowed to him and called him senior. Wang Lin nodded in satisfaction. He stroked his beard and smiled. "You have some of the elegance you had when you were young." Xie Qian was well-versed in both literature and martial arts. At first glance, he looked like a lean scholar. Only when he fought did he realize that he could fight. Li Yun, on the other hand, did not have the air of a scholar. His figure was lean and tall. He stood there like a spear. One look and you could tell that he was a martial artist. As Wang Lin said this, Li Yun's eyes darted around. A question was stuck in his mouth, wanting to ask. Chapter 8:26. Could it be as Lu Shi said, that he and his master were not master and disciple, but father and son? Wang Lin also said that he resembled his master when he was young. This piqued Li Yun's curiosity, as if a few kittens were gently scratching him. Xie Qian sighed softly and said, "This is not the place to talk. Can we enter the city for a chat?" Li Yun hurriedly said, "Of course. Please follow me, master and this gentleman." After all, he was Li Yun's relative. Even Li Yun acknowledged him, so the city guards naturally had to open the city gates to let them in. The city was quiet. Occasionally, the sound of the night watchman could be heard. Li Yun brought him back to his mansion. Although his house was only a 2-level mansion, there were still many empty rooms. Xianxia looked at him and felt gratified. Looks like you've been doing well these past few years. Wanzhou was the place where the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group wreaked havoc the most. But now, the buildings in the city were lined up neatly, the streets were wide and tidy, and the air was fresh and clean. It was unlike other cities, where the streets were filled with filth and the air was filled with foul odors. Li Yun invited Xianxia to sit in the seat of honor. His eyes were filled with admiration. Master. In the end, Li Yun was so nervous that he could not speak. It was as if thousands of flies were buzzing in his head. Xianxia took a sip of tea and casually raised his head to look at Li Yun, who was kneeling not far away. He asked calmly, "What's the matter?" Li Yun stammered, unable to speak. After all, it was somewhat shameful to ask his master if he was his biological father. What if it was a misunderstanding? Master left a letter in the thatched cottage, saying that he wanted to seek revenge. Then, did he succeed? Li Yun cowered and changed his question at the last minute. If Li Yun dared to look up, he would have realized that Xianxia's bearing was not something an ordinary martial artist could have. One's temperament changed one's body. That was obviously a noble bearing that could only be cultivated in a wealthy family for a long time. How was it like living in seclusion in the mountains for more than 10 years? Hearing Li Yun's question, Xianxia's hand that was holding the tea paused. He almost spilled the tea. Xianxia was also a martial artist. His kung fu was unusually stable. To make him make such a mistake, it was obvious how lethal Li Yun's question was. "No, I failed." Xianxia squeezed out these words through gritted teeth. Li Yun lowered his head and asked weakly. He seemed to have accepted his fate. "Earlier, I met my lord's father, the Chongzhou magistrate, Lu Shi. He said that he and my father were childhood friends. He even said that this disciple is not only Master's disciple, but also very likely to be your biological son. Master, is this true?" Xianxia tilted his head and searched his mind for Lu Shi's face. He hadn't seen Lu Shi for many years. The impression he had of Lu Shi was still that of his youth. Li Yun saw that his master did not reply for a long time. His heart sank and almost sank to the bottom. "What do you mean by very likely?" "It's true," Xianxia added in a slightly displeased manner. His own son had been taken in as a subordinate by his enemy's daughter, and this matter was quite stifling. More importantly, the relationship between Xianxia and Lu Shi was not as good as the latter made it out to be. When Li Yun heard this, he suddenly raised his head in astonishment, unable to contain his joy. After a long pause, he spat out a word, "Father." Xianxia nodded lightly. On the other hand, Li Yun was stuck. The expected reunion between father and son was supposed to be a touching reunion. Why was it so dull? "Father, then why don't you acknowledge me as your son?" Li Yun felt a little wronged. He and his adoptive parents only met twice a year. The person he interacted with the most was Xianxia. When he was young, he often wondered why his master was not his father. Xianxia lowered his eyes and said, "When did I not acknowledge you?" Li Yun was stuck again. A teacher for a day, a father for life. The family spear technique needs to be passed down from master to disciple. "Since I am your master and your father, when did I not acknowledge you?" Li Yun was speechless. What he said made so much sense that he was speechless. Then this surname. Li Yun lowered his head and struggled for a while. His mood also lightened up. "Your father was chased out of the family. Naturally, your surname cannot be Xie." Xianxia answered matter-of-factly. He continued, "In that tragic case, I brought you along and luckily escaped. In my muddle-headedness, I forgot who I was. I wandered all the way from Hejian County to Fenyi County. Later, I was taken in by the Li couple. That family had no children for many years, so they adopted you. When your father remembered who I was, you were already 2 years old." Li Yun's original name was Li Gozhu. The blood clot in Xianxia's brain slowly subsided and he regained his memory. Suddenly his head hurt. He, Xianxia, was well versed in both literature and martial arts. Yet, his son had such a lowly name. However, he was too embarrassed to argue with the couple. He simply let that name be Li Yun's nickname and even made the decision to give him a nice-sounding name. Yun meant that he was wealthy and well-versed in both literature and martial arts. It was much better than Goju. After the couple adopted Liyun, they quickly became pregnant. Naturally, they cherished their child even more and did not mind Xiaqian's actions. After listening to his explanation, Liyun did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, he quickly noticed the strangeness in Xiaqian's words. What did he mean by chased out of the family? What discord did father have with the Xia family? There were 4 noble families in Dongqing: the Feng family of Shangyang, the Wang family of Lengjia, the Xia family of Jiangning, and the Meng family of Zhangzhou. Although he did not know much about the Xia family, looking at Feng Jin beside him, Liyun knew that Xiaqian, who was a direct descendant, must be very respectable. According to Lu Shi, Xiaqian was a leading figure of his generation. How did he become like this? Because of Xiaqian, Liyun specially asked Feng Jin about the Wang family of Lengjia and the Xia family of Jiangning. He discovered something strange. These 2 families seemed to have faded out of sight at the same time. Their activities in the imperial court had decreased. Xiaqian's eyes slanted and he said plainly, "You are still a child. This matter has nothing to do with you." Liyun was disheartened. He stubbornly changed the question. Then father's enemy is the person who killed Yun's mother? Who is that person? This time, Xiaqian did not avoid the question. Instead, he said, "A demon." This monstrous genius wasn't just a curse, it was a real monstrous genius. Liyun wanted to continue asking, but when he saw Xiaqian's calm face, all his courage disappeared. Then, will father still leave? Liyun's goal in life was very simple. He wanted to take care of his master, marry a wife, and have children. With his persistent efforts, he finally had a sliver of hope for the latter. If his master left, who would he take care of? "I'm not leaving." These 3 simple words were like music to Liyun's ears. "Tomorrow, introduce me to him," Xiaqian said. "Introduce. There are some things that I need to discuss with your lord. Even if I can't find Lu Shi, it will be the same if I can find his daughter." Chapter 827. Take your time, father and son. Wan Xian glanced at Liyun. His features resembled Xiaqian when he was young, but his delicate features were closer to his mother's. Thinking of this, Wan Xian could not help but sigh. If not for that incident, Xiaqian and his wife would be an enviable immortal couple. Liyun hurriedly let the servants lead the way and brought Wan Xian to the guest room. Seeing his son's busy appearance, Xiaqian smiled and said, "After 2 to 3 years, you've grown a lot." Li Yun's ears perked up. His father's words were praising him for growing up and being able to take charge. Even though his heart was bursting with joy, he maintained his habitual aloofness on his face. Xiaqian changed the topic and said to Li Yun, "According to tradition, marriage should have been arranged a long time ago." At this point, his brows furrowed uncontrollably. If Xiaqian had not been secretly removed from the Xia family, Li Yun would have been the legitimate grandson of the Xia family. Marriage arrangements were made at the age of 13 or 14. Usually, it was chosen by the wife of the family. It's a pity that your mother passed away early. Otherwise, she would have been able to attend my first birthday banquet. The rules of aristocratic families were as numerous as the hairs on a cow. Marriage was arranged at the age of 13 or 14, and marriage at the age of 18 or 19. Considering Li Yun's age, he should have gotten married long ago and had children. The current situation was a little awkward. It felt like he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. As someone from an aristocratic family, although Xiaqian did not crazily value bloodline, he did not see himself as a commoner. When his son arranged a marriage, it was best for the bride to be of noble birth. She did not need to have a distinguished family background, but she had to be smart. The main point was she had to be smart. It couldn't be helped. Xiaqian's nerves were strained by that strange demon. He was afraid that his son would marry the wrong wife and ruin 3 generations. Xiaqian mentioning Li Yun's birth mother calmed Li Yun's swollen mind. Ever since he was young, he had never heard Xiaqian talk about his birth mother. Li Yun asked carefully, "Father, I heard from Governor Lu that my mother was from the Langyao Wang family?" Both parents were direct descendants of the four noble families. In this era where bloodlines were important, Li Yun's birth was even nobler than the royal family. Xie Qian sighed and said with a look of reminiscence, "Yes, your mother's surname is Wang, and her maiden name is Huiyun. She is the legitimate daughter of the Wang family of Langya. She and the current family master of the Wang family are siblings. Unfortunately, the heavens didn't help anyone. Her body was delicate, and she unfortunately died of a hemorrhage when she gave birth to you." Li Yun listened attentively. When he heard Xie Qian say his mother's maiden name, Huiyun, his eyelids twitched. Xie Qian didn't miss his son's reaction and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Yun shook his head. "No, I just feel that the name, mother, is similar to a lady I know. Not to mention similar names, there were many people with the same name in the world." Xie Qian did not care. Li Yun asked again, "Mother? I heard from Governor Lu that she is a rare talented woman." Xie Qian said proudly, "She's not just a talented woman. Using Lu Shi as an analogy, your mother's talent is more than enough to crush Lu Shi." Li Yun, "Father, how deep is the enmity between you and Lu province's governor?" However, after hearing Xie Qian's words, Li Yun also felt a sense of admiration for his mother, whom he had never met. He was also a little depressed. According to his father, his mother died giving birth to him. "Father, do you have a portrait of my mother?" Li Yun heard from Lu Shi that Xie Qian was an all-rounder with both pen and sword. He could recite poems and paint with a brush, and he could kill enemies with a spear. If that was the case, his father should have drawn something like a portrait of his mother as a memento, right? "Of course I do." Xie Qian had been a mountain otaku for more than 10 years. If it were anyone else, they would probably have degenerated into a slovenly Jianghu man. However, Xie Qian's upbringing was ingrained in his bones. Even if he only lived in a thatched hut, he could still create a dissolute and unrestrained demeanor of a hermit. As a single father who raised his son to make a living, he did not neglect his other skills. His brush and ink were still outstanding. To prevent his memory from fading, he drew several portraits and carried them with him. Li Yunxing hurriedly opened the portrait. When he saw the person's face, he was instantly stunned. If he was not sure that Lady Huijun was younger than him by a few months, he would have suspected that she was his mother. "Isn't this Lady Hui?" he muttered as his forehead was hit. How rude. He did not call her mother, but Lady Hui. Was this fellow rebelling? Li Yun hesitated for a while and said honestly, "Father, I have seen the person in the portrait." Xie Qian's heart jumped to his throat. His son had seen that evildoer? "When did you see her?" "Yesterday," Li Yun explained. "There is a lady in the Lord's backyard. She looks similar to the mother in the portrait, but her temperament is very different." The Wang Huiyun in the portrait had a temperament like an orchid, elegant and refined. She wore a luxurious dress and stood among the flowers. Her right hand was placed on her slightly protruding abdomen. There was a faint smile on her face. Her entire person was shrouded in the halo of maternal love. When people saw the portrait, they were first attracted by her temperament, then they noticed her appearance. Even through the portrait, they could guess that this was a talented woman who had read extensively. Only by immersing herself in this field for a long time could one cultivate such a temperament. As for Lady Hui, who Li Yun had seen before, she was also a beauty beyond compare. However, that kind of beauty was dazzling and dazzling. One was reserved, the other was flamboyant. Hearing Li Yun's words, Xie Qian immediately became vigilant towards the woman who looked like his wife. Without waiting for Xie Qian to regain his senses, Li Yun carefully kept the portrait and said shyly, "Father, what is it?" "Your son has a woman that he admires." Li Yun did not want his father to decide on his engagement. It would be better for him to confess now to avoid unnecessary trouble. Xie Qian was speechless. Although he had unwillingly lowered his standards for choosing a wife, Xie Qian really did not want his son to marry an illiterate, vulgar woman from the mountains. Xie Qian immediately pictured in his mind a woman with a mouth full of yellow teeth, spittle flying everywhere as she spoke, black dirt hidden under her nails, noisy eating, snoring like thunder in her sleep, scolding and scuffling with others. His vision darkened and he almost stopped breathing. "Son, don't take things too hard." Xiaqian's heart trembled as he asked, "Which family is it?" He did not care if it was a free love, he just wanted to know which family it was. Even if it was a peasant girl, he would accept it. He only hoped that his upbringing was not wrong. Hejian's Shangguan family, I wonder if father has heard of it? Li Yun said a little embarrassedly, her name is Shangguan Wan. Hejian's Shangguan family? Xiaqian knew this. He had already prepared for the worst but did not expect Li Yun to give him a surprise. The wife of the Shangguan family is not bad. Does that mean father agrees? Chapter 8:28. Xiaqian's face darkened as he reprimanded his son. A marriage contract is a bond between two families. How can it be so casual? Parents could turn a blind eye to the fact that they had feelings for each other before marriage, but the marriage rules couldn't be messed around. Li Yun was like a frosted eggplant. His heart that had flown high up in the sky fell to the ground again. What do you mean, father? Of course it's a serious discussion about marriage. We'll invite Iceman to be the matchmaker. Everything will be ready. Li Yun thought of Shangguan Wan's situation and said with a headache, I'm afraid that won't work. Why not? Wan escaped from her ex-husband's house. Her maiden home is controlled by her stepmother. If Wan goes back, she will not be able to return. Xiaqian was speechless. He was dumbfounded by his son's successive landmines. Could he tell her all the scares at once? Xiaqian did not mind Wan's second marriage. He was just a little worried. Escaped from her husband's house? What do you mean? Could it be that she is still engaged? Seducing a married woman? Was his son asking for a beating? Li Yun shook his head like a rattle drum and hurriedly explained, Wan and her ex-husband were indeed engaged, but before she could marry into the family, she died. That in-law's family was extremely harsh. They did not let it go and forced Wan to be a widow, almost causing Wan to die. Her husband is dead, so Wan should be free. I admire her, but I also want to tell father about this. It's a clear path. After all, he was still a naive young man. Li Yun's face was already red before he finished speaking. If father insists on proposing marriage to Iceman, you can mention it directly to the Lord. Xiaqian's emotions fluctuated. He asked doubtfully, what does this have to do with your Lord? The Lord and Wan are like siblings. No, like sisters. Now Wan has no one to rely on. Only the Lord is her family. Xiaqian was speechless. Although his own pig finally knew how to woo cabbages, his son's brain was a little slow. Seeing Li Yun's sparkling eyes, Xiaqian felt tired and could only nod in agreement. Tell your Lord about this in detail tomorrow. Li Yun heaved a long sigh of relief. He was so excited that he couldn't sleep the entire night. The next day, he woke up on time to practice his spear dance. He instructed the servants to pay attention to Xiaqian and Wan Xian's movements and immediately prepare breakfast. Don't assume that Li Yun was very dedicated to his work and went to work early in the morning. He had only taken a detour to intercept Shangguan Wan. Li Yun leaped up. Relying on his height, he easily reached the top of the wall and called out to the courtyard. Shangguan Wan was not the first to notice Li Yun. Instead, it was the urchin who was studying below who noticed him. Seeing the familiar person lying on the wall of the courtyard, the urchins all looked at Shangguan Wan with smiles. Shangguan Wan blushed in annoyance and placed the bamboo slips on the table while the group of radishes burst into laughter. Everyone, write down the words on the board. We'll check it later. There was a simple blackboard and chalk in the courtyard. The blackboard was just a piece of board that was painted black. The so-called chalk was actually chalk, a type of limestone. When the iron mines in Xiangyang district were mined, they could be made into chalk. Before this, no one had thought of using this white material to write and teach. It was the Lord who was clever and good at making use of it. What are you doing here again? Li Yun took something out and said to her, I passed by here and brought you some breakfast. Shangguan Wan took it and realized that Li Yun was still looking at her with a burning gaze. She felt a little shy. Still looking? Shangguan said angrily. When are you coming over? Why must you let the students watch a joke? Liyun scratched his head and said uneasily, Isn't this too happy? My father came last night. Master is really my father. Shangguan was shocked. Seeing Liyun's rosy face, she felt a little nervous. You idiot! Did you tell your father about us? Of course he did. Liyun added, Father said that he would discuss this matter in detail with the Lord today. Shangguan wished she could crush Liyun like a bun in her hand. How could marriage be a child's play? At least let her be mentally prepared. You're not willing? Liyun looked at her expression carefully. He thought of the day of his triumphant return, when Wan threw a sachet to the Lord and didn't even look at him. His heart felt so suffocated that it was indescribable. Shangguan snorted softly and said in a low voice, You didn't even discuss such an important matter with me. Liyun felt wrong too. He hung his head and said, But Wan already agreed. He even secretly held her little hand with Shangguan's tacit consent. Times have changed. An ugly daughter-in-law would have to meet her in-laws sooner or later, but she had to be allowed to dress up and be mentally prepared. Shangguan's heart softened when she saw Liyun's dejected expression. Forget it, what's the use of saying this now? I don't blame you. Shangguan said, It's getting late. Go to the military camp early and don't delay. As for the marriage proposal, if Lanting agrees, I'll agree. Shangguan's cheeks blushed. Without waiting for Liyun to come back to his senses, she had already gone to the corner door and slammed it shut. Liyun was left standing on the spot, laughing uncontrollably. Although Shangguan was married, she was a widow. She didn't even have a fire-repelling painting as her dowry. She was as clean as a blank piece of paper when it came to matters between men and women. Her previous marriage made her disheartened. It was at this time that Liyun rashly barged into her life. She wanted to learn martial arts to kill the enemy, so Jiang Pingji sent Liyun to give her special lessons. Unexpectedly, after a while, she was moved by this innocent youth. At first, Shangguan had no intention of remarrying, but if it was Liyun, she really couldn't refuse. Liyun introduced Xiaqian to Jiang Pingji. He was more attentive than Xiaqian himself. When Jiang Pingji found out about this, she couldn't help but be stunned. She didn't expect Xiaqian to appear there. She bowed to Xiaqian as a junior. I've often heard my father talk about you. Now that I've met you, I realize that my father's words can't describe you at all. Xiaqian had the elegance of a scholar and the heroic bearing of a general. Looking at him, it was as if she could picture a middle-aged version of Liyun in her mind. Jiang Pingji had a sweet tongue, but Xiaqian didn't expose her lies. Would Lu Shi often mention him to his daughter? She wouldn't even dare to do so in her daydreams. Lu Zhongqing's daughter is indeed extraordinary. Xiaqian didn't mince words and went straight to the point. If I'm not wrong, Lu Shi should have told you about my purpose in going to Zhongzhou. Jiang Pingji nodded. He said it was to assassinate an enemy. Did Uncle Xie succeed? Chapter 829. Evildoer. Jiang Pingji's gaze shifted and she secretly clenched her right hand. Her tone was filled with murderous intent. I heard my father mention that evildoer. It was said that she was the culprit behind my mother's death. However, she was omnipotent and had extraordinary abilities. My father couldn't do anything to her. Xiaqian had been observing Jiang Pingji's reaction. Seeing her reaction, he knew that she knew a lot of inside information. Lu Shi was a big-hearted person. He told such an important matter to his child. Wasn't he afraid that his child would do something stupid out of impulse? Xiaqian did not tell Liyun the truth about his mother's death. He was actually afraid that his child would do something stupid out of impulse. That evildoer was not simple. Even the master said, an ordinary human body could not hurt the evildoer at all. To put it bluntly, going there would be suicide. Rather than saying that she has omnipotent abilities, it's better to say that the person she hooked up with is powerful. Xiaqian sneered mockingly. His eyes were filled with obvious disgust and contempt. He continued, perhaps no one in the world can compare to her in terms of seducing the master. Jiang Pengji nodded in agreement. She smiled and said, "Since ancient times, heroes have a weakness for the charms of beauties. Even heroes among men are like this, let alone those ordinary people who are controlled by their bodies. I'm just a little curious. My father said that the evildoer has evil methods that are beyond imagination. She is comparable to Daji, who seduces the master. Why didn't any master teach her a lesson?" From the information obtained so far, it was known that there were no immortal techniques in this world, but there were methods beyond imagination. For example, Monk Liaochen of the Hejian Buddhist temple. He could read one's face and know one's fate. Xie Qian frowned. Jiang Pengji's question was one that he could not understand. "All these years, I have secretly visited many hermits and masters. I know some inside information." Xie Qian said, "That year, when I found out that my wife's body was possessed by this evildoer, I immediately thought of the ancient fox demon who possessed Su Daji. Before that, I didn't believe in deceiving gods. But facing my wife who was completely unfamiliar, I had to believe in her. I had no choice but to secretly seek help from a master." Xie Qian sought help from Monk Liaochen of Hejin. Unfortunately, the news was leaked and the evildoer was alarmed. "I heard father say that you're looking for Master Liaochen." Xie Qian nodded with a bitter smile. "Yes, Master Liaochen." Unfortunately, before he could even see Master Liaochen, the evildoer had already discovered his intentions. The evildoer took the opportunity to ambush him and heavily injured him. Later, he encountered bandits who wanted to kill him. Xie Qian had no choice but to risk his life and jump off the cliff with his infant son. Fortunately, he won the bet, and the vines and branches on the cliff side saved his and his son's lives. Jiang Pengji's streaming room was still open. When Xie Qian first appeared, many viewers expressed that the uncle was really charming. Everyone was silently praising the uncle's looks. When they heard the conversation between the two, the bullet screen on the live broadcast screen changed in unison. "Atlantis, does old handsome Xie Qian mean that he found out that his wife has been transmigrated? You are amazing, my ancient people. Dijon Mingming, that's normal, right? After all, they were partners sharing the same bed. How could he not notice? Yenrian, I'm a little confused. Who can explain what's going on?" Zishou Chojio, do you remember that there's a transmigrator in the host's world? According to the content of the previous live broadcast, this transmigrator took over Xie Qian's wife's body and was later discovered by Xie Qian. The transmigrator took the initiative to kill Xie Qian's infant son, Han Mei. Xie Qian and his son were lucky enough to survive. Of course, they would think of a way to take revenge. Kumo Lemonade, this? Transmigrating isn't something that the person can control, right? But that transmigrator is really too much. Not only did she take over the body of someone else's wife, she also wanted to kill the husband and son of this body. But Xie Qian also wanted to kill the transmigrator. If I were a transmigrator, I'd rather live than die. Even though I feel guilty, everyone wants to live, right? Liang Pin Puzi, I don't think this matter can be put into the same category. Everyone wants to live, but what the transmigrator did was really too much. According to what we know, not only did this transmigrator want to kill Xie Qian and his son, but she also killed the host's mother and her first two brothers. Remember Lu Huan, the illegitimate daughter of the Lu family? According to the analysis of the gods, Lu Huan is the daughter of the transmigrator and Prince Changshu. Remember Lu Huan's husband? Wumajun is the son of the transmigrator and the emperor of Dongqing. Most importantly, these two half-siblings were born from Xie Qian's wife, Wang Huiyun's body. No one would be able to accept such a thing, right? The bullet screen discussed intensely. Many of the audience thought of the transmigrator who tried to assassinate Jiang Pengji and shuddered. From the perspective of Xie Qian and the original body, Wang Huiyun, the transmigrator took over someone else's body and used it to try to kill the original body's beloved husband and son. She also used this body to entangle with countless men and gave birth to two bastards. Who wouldn't feel disgusted? Xie Qian didn't know that the audience was discussing this matter. He said, I originally wanted to seek help from Master Liaochen, But the demon was too powerful and saw through my plan. Later, I met another expert by chance. He told me that the demon had an extraordinary background. I'm afraid he's from another world and can disturb the predetermined fate. He also said that many experts have noticed something strange, but the demon has strange supernatural powers and is good at hiding his whereabouts. If he hasn't matured, we can try. But so many years have passed and he has matured. It's hard to get rid of him. The experts in this world were just more powerful charlatans. They could pinch and calculate, but they couldn't fight. The transmigrator's fate was not in this world. They couldn't calculate the person's fate, let alone find her. Someone from another world? Xianxia sighed. Yes, someone from another world might be a demon that harms people. Jiang Pengji rolled her eyes and found something strange. She knew the general location of the transmigrator because he had power and influence. He could send people to help him investigate. Xianxia was a loner, powerless, and removed from the Xie family. How could he be so sure that the transmigrator was in the Zhongzhou palace? I have a question. How did you know that the demon was in the Zhongzhou palace? Did an expert tell you that? The expert didn't tell me, but he gave me this. Xianxia took something out of his pocket. It was a jade pendant in the shape of a yin-yang fish. Jiang Pengji stepped forward to take it. It was the size of a palm and felt warm to the touch. The texture was smooth and delicate. It was a rare warm jade. The jade pendant was very strange. It was half black and half white. The black was pure and the white was translucent. What is this? Chapter 830. The Prime Minister of the previous dynasty, Huang Fuxiu? Jiang Pengji had read about him in the history books. It was rumored that he was proficient in the 8 trigrams of the Book of Changes. He had the heavenly eye and could communicate with ghosts and gods. At first, she thought that he was not doing his job properly. Instead of ruling the country and fighting wars, he pretended to be a quack. But now, it seemed that the rumors were true. Otherwise, why would there be such a strange thing among his burial items? Other than its strange shape, this warm jade has no other uses. Jiang Pengji murmured. Xianxia explained, the master said that this item can ward off evil spirits and stabilize the soul. It specializes in restraining demons and ghosts, and it has another magical power. Jiang Pengji curiously looked at the jade pendant, but she did not find anything strange. What magical power? Xianxia said, it is said that there is another universe in the jade pendant. It is difficult for demons to hide from it. It is a Daoist treasure. Jiang Pengji stared at Xianxia, blinked and said, can you explain it more clearly? No matter how one looked at it, it was just an ordinary jade pendant. Xianxia smiled bitterly and said, wear the jade by your side when you sleep. After a long time, the spiritual jade will connect with your soul. When you sleep, you can travel freely between heaven and earth, dream of many strange scenes, and remember them clearly when you wake up. The master told me that as long as I drip the target's blood on the center of the yin-yang fish, I can see the target's location when I enter the dream. Jiang Pengji was stunned. She said, that's amazing. There is such a thing in the world. The 150,000 idle viewers kept sending 666. The streaming room was finally developing from ancient times to Xianxia? You used this to find the demon's location? Jiang Pengji asked. It was simply a Xianxia version of the GPS. Xianxia smiled bitterly. How can it be so simple? It took me several years to find the general location of the other party. Once the distance is too close to the demon, this thing loses its effect. I think it must be the demon's invisibility ability. Therefore, this thing could only lock the general location, but it could not accurately locate the target. Jiang Pengji looked at the yin-yang jade pendant thoughtfully. She felt that the characteristics of this thing were somewhat familiar. On the other side, the idle spectators in the live stream were also envious. Yuan Xiaoyao, Hanmei's dad, said that the jade pendant has a different dimension. Does that mean it's a portable space? Duan Lu, host, do you want to bite your finger and bleed to try it? Perhaps it would successfully recognize its master. Moyan Sang Yuan, maybe it's not just a dimensional pocket. There's also a magical spring that can cleanse one's bones. The stars of last night. Maybe there's not only a magical spiritual spring, but also an even more magical spiritual field. We can have fun on a farm. Sui feng xiao shi, maybe there is not only a spiritual field, but also a small farmhouse with countless cultivation methods. Autumn water. In order not to break the formation, let me say this too. Maybe there's not only a farmhouse, but also an old grandpa. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Salted fish were indeed salted fish. They were a bunch of people who didn't mind stirring up trouble. She ignored the idle audience and asked Xie Qian, "How do I use it? Just wear it by your side every day?" Xie Qian said, "An expert once said that if a person with a strong soul is born with the ability to communicate with the spiritual jade, their dreams will be clearer. If it's an ordinary person, they can only increase the amount of time they have contact with the spiritual jade. After constant practice, they can enter the dream and communicate with the spirit. It all depends on the person's talent." Jiang Pengji looked at the jade pendant in her hand and frowned. She had a feeling that she had seen this thing before. Xie Qian also noticed Jiang Pengji's strangeness. He asked casually, "What did you find?" Jiang Pengji said, "Can you lend this treasure to me for a while? I don't know why, but when I see it, I have an illusion that it looks familiar, as if I've seen it somewhere before. But I can't remember at the moment. I wonder if you can agree to it?" For Xie Qian, this jade pendant was his lifeblood. If he lost it, he would never be able to find the demon's whereabouts, let alone seek revenge. But during the previous assassination, he realized that he was just a mortal. There was no way he could compete with the demon. He needed the power of a mortal. If not for that, Xie Qian would not have brought Wan Xian all the way to Wanzhou. If Jiang Pengji wanted to lend it to him, he naturally would not refuse. Xie Qian nodded in agreement. Jiang Pengji hurriedly said, "I'll borrow it for 2 days. I'll definitely return it after some time." After that, Xie Qian mentioned Li Yun and Shengguan Wan's marriage. His son was not young anymore. It was not easy for him to win over a cabbage. As a father, he had to assist him. With Li Yun's current awkward status, it was great luck to be able to marry Shengguan Wan, the daughter of a noble family. I have no opinion on this matter. The key is Wan Er's attitude. You should have heard from Han Mei about Wan Er's past. It wasn't her fault. In all fairness, Wan Er and Han Mei are a good match. The two of them love each other. It would be best if they could get married. In front of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women, a good woman should not marry a second time. Even if a woman's husband died before she married, a woman should be widowed for a husband she had never met. Xie Qian was not so pedantic. In fact, he scoffed at most of the contents of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Not to mention second marriages, there were many women who married 2 or 3 times among the gentry. They only looked at the match and bloodline. They did not care about anything else. In fact, Shengguan Wan's status as a widow was nothing to Xie Qian. What kind of past is that? Why are those idiots making a fuss about being a widow? Why don't they take a look at themselves? Xie Qian's eyes were full of disdain. If you say so, I feel more at ease. When Xie Qian came out of the district headquarters, he saw his son looking around from afar. He looked as stupid as he could be. "Father," Xie Qian pretended not to know him and walked past his son. Li Yun was depressed. He only wanted to know if the Lord had agreed to his marriage with Wan. In another room, Jiang Pengji was lost in thought as she looked at the yin-yang jade pendant on the table. She searched her memory seriously. Based on her experience, it was impossible for her to have seen such an item, but the sense of familiarity lingered. Jiang Pengji held the jade pendant and closed her eyes in deep thought. She wanted to use her mental energy to explore the material of the jade pendant. It was at this moment that an invisible cyclone appeared on the surface of the jade pendant. A weak suction attracted her attention. She closed her eyes and calmed her mind. She took the opportunity to inject her mental energy into the pendant. Suddenly, the originally dark field of vision suddenly brightened. It was the high sky covered by clouds and mist. She was stunned for a moment. She realized that a red line extended all the way to the bottom of the clouds. With a thought, she felt an illusion of weightlessness. Her line of sight followed the red line and pulled closer to the ground. Seeing that she was about to hit the ground, she suddenly opened her eyes. The feeling of weightlessness suddenly disappeared. Chapter 8:31. After the high-altitude scene, Jiang Pingji could see that the audience in the streaming room was still confused. From their point of view, Jiang Pingji was holding the yin-yang jade pendant. Her expression was slightly relaxed. After a while, she opened her eyes and muttered something, "It's this thing." What on earth was it? She didn't know what was going on. The 150,000 idle viewers felt their curiosity was piqued, but the bad streamer refused to answer their questions. She was going to kill those with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Before Jiang Pingji could sort out her thoughts, some of the viewers couldn't help but ask questions. The entire screen was filled with all kinds of greetings. "Huanyu, I'm so anxious. Can't you just say everything in one go? It's so uncomfortable to leave half of it unsaid." "Wuxian, streamer, what's the origin of this jade pendant? Is it possible that there's a portable space, a spiritual spring, a spiritual field, a farmhouse, and a portable grandpa? If there's really such a thing, streamer, you might as well stop streaming Conquering the World and start streaming Cultivation. Someday Daoist, haha, that's a good suggestion. If there's a streaming of Cultivation, I want to be the streamer's first disciple. Even if I'm not an inner disciple or a personal disciple, it's good for me to be a registered disciple. Cultivation is much better than Conquering the World." Sha Jiutian Duanzhang Go. Tisk, why are you guys so optimistic? If this streaming room stops streaming the dukedom and changes to a streaming of Cultivation, do you think it's possible for you guys to squeeze into the streaming room? Maybe everyone in the world will run to the signal tower and live there. When that time comes, with the hand speed of you guys who have been single for more than 20 years, do you think you can get a spot in the streaming room? You're thinking too much. Shiyu Sichin, getting a spot in the streaming room is a small matter. I'm afraid that after the streamer changes to Cultivation, everyone on Earth will go there. 150,000 idle spectators gathered together, and they could easily lead the topic astray. At first, they were eager to know the origin of the yin-yang jade pendant, but now they were thinking about how to cultivate in the future. When Jiang Pingji sorted out her thoughts, the viewers were talking about how many years they could live freely and happily after cultivating. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She sent a bullet screen to cut off their daydreams so that they wouldn't be able to stop thinking. "Host V, you guys are thinking too much. Your divergent thinking is not bad, but it's a pity that only a few of your sentences are relevant. Rather than calling this item a jade pendant, it would be more accurate to call it a type of interstellar or, even in my previous world, it was extremely rare and precious." When Jiang Pingji revealed the answer, the audience was in an uproar. Then they were deeply disappointed. They had thought that they could cultivate and didn't expect such an answer. Drunken Cloud Cat Demon. Disappointed. He was exceptionally disappointed. If it was just a piece of, or, it would be meaningless. Regardless of whether it was ancient times, modern times, or the interstellar era, they were all essentially the same dimensional world. The only difference between the three was the time axis. If they were to vigorously promote the development of science and technology, even the most backward era would enter the interstellar era. This was the inevitable outcome of the development of science and technology. The ores on Earth would be considered interstellar ores on other planets, wouldn't they? If that's the case, there's nothing special about the yin-yang jade pendant in the host's hand. Many of the audience expressed their disappointment, but a small number of people noticed the details of Jiang Pingji's words. She said that this interstellar ore was extremely rare even in her world. This was thought-provoking. In the interstellar era, there were tens of thousands of habitable planets. What they lacked the least was all kinds of energy. Under such circumstances, for Jiang Pingji to describe it as rare and precious, it was definitely a priceless treasure. Many people thought of this, and their extinguished curiosity was rekindled. Fried Egg Cheng. Streamer, what special use does this interstellar ore have? Jiang Pingji flipped the yin-yang jade pendant left and right, a light smile on her face. Because there was no one around, Jiang Pingji wasn't afraid of being heard. She opened her mouth and said, "Special use, I'm afraid I'll scare you if I tell you." According to the records of the Interstellar Federation, a new intelligent race will be discovered every 7 interstellar days. There are many forms of intelligent races. The most common creatures are those that are made up of cells, and the rarest are those that are pure energy bodies or spiritual bodies. Regardless of whether they are pure energy bodies or spiritual bodies, their life structure is not stable. Most of them can only survive in a specific environment. A small number of them can rely on special substances or mediums to leave their original ecological environment. This special substance is the ore in my hand. Can you guess its value? Jiang Pingji rarely talked about her past, so naturally, the audience didn't want to miss it. Awesome Widigu. Streamer, don't keep us in suspense, I'm dying of anxiety. Tiantan show ba ba ba. How much value can such a small thing have? Is it possible to buy an entire Earth? Some of the audience couldn't wait to urge her, while others laughed and teased her. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, "An or the size of a fingernail can buy one or even several or planets. Do you think it's valuable?" This thing is the most important cornerstone of the central hub of the Sky Brain. With it, the Sky Brain network can be realized in a real sense. You won't understand even if I tell you all this, you just need to know that it's very powerful. Unfortunately, it's a waste of God's gift now. Such a powerful thing, if it was placed in the right era, could be used to its greatest potential and create endless wealth. But now? It can only be treated as an ordinary accessory. Jiang Pingji was once one of the people with the highest authority in the Federation. In other words, her authority in the Sky Brain was second only to the Commander-in-Chief of the Federation. Many highly classified information that ordinary people couldn't come into contact with was completely open to her. She had interacted with the Sky Brain before, so she knew that the Sky Brain wasn't complicated data, but a living body. To be precise, the Sky Brain should be a virtual creature that was a combination of pure energy and spirit. This was very similar to a creature like the system. Speaking of which, it was strange. Even the Sky Brain couldn't completely leave its host, so how did the system do it? Was it purely dependent on the host? But the host was just an ordinary human. In theory, it wasn't enough to become the host of a virtual creature. Jiang Pingji touched the yin-yang jade pendant in her hand, her expression revealing some suspicion. But very quickly, she threw this question to the back of her mind. At that moment, the live stream room had already exploded. Such a small thing was worth who knew how many Earths? Was she kidding them? Why would Jiang Pingji have the leisure to tease them? Chapter 8:32. Catch a rat? Catch what rat? The audience was confused. Did a rat break into the streamer's room and eat her supper? Jiang Pingji didn't explain further. She put away the yin-yang jade pendant and, for the first time, asked for leave from the audience and turned off the stream. It was not convenient for the audience to see what happened next. After that, Jiang Pingji found a quiet place and poked the system. "I know you're still alive. Don't play dead. You saw what happened just now. Is there anything you want to say?" After Jiang Pingji finished speaking, she didn't hear anything else. If she wasn't sure that the system was still locked up, she might have suspected that the system had run away. Squeak if you don't want to die. We're already at this point. What else can you do? With the appearance of the yin-yang jade pendant, Jiang Pingji had more information on the system. Jiang Pingji said bluntly, "The system could only speak unwillingly." Squeak. Faced with the system's malicious act of cuteness, Jiang Pingji curled her lips and said, "I'll give you half an hour to be honest." The system snorted fiercely and said with disdain, "What honesty? You're still too young to fool me." Ever since they parted on bad terms, the system and Jiang Pingji hadn't talked anymore. The system knew that every time Jiang Pingji looked for it, nothing good would come out of it. It must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to have met such a host. "Can you tell me where your core carrier is?" Jiang Pingji asked it with a smile. Her tone was casual, as if she was just asking about the weather. The system secretly spat on the inside, but it said, "Aren't you my host? Don't play dumb. You know what core carrier I'm talking about. Jiang Pingji changed her style of communication when she realized that harmonious communication wasn't possible. After seeing the yin-yang jade pendant, I remembered that you're a system and a virtual being. Logically speaking, virtual beings can't leave their original environment without a special carrier. Even the sky brain can't avoid this. You're the same. Hearing Jiang Pingji compare it to the sky brain, the system almost exploded in anger. Major General, I don't have that kind of thing at all. You should just give up. It was a system that had the ability to travel between different planes. It was a true high-level life form. How could a mere heavenly brain compare to it? Jiang Pingji saw that the system refused to pay up. She sneered and asked, "You don't feel guilty for saying that?" The system's heart skipped a beat. On the surface, it still stuck to its original words and refused to be coaxed by Jiang Pingji. Fine, 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 since you insist on not having a carrier core, I won't force you. But I have a question that I'm very curious about. I don't know if you can answer it. How do you shoot live broadcasts? Or rather, where was the camera used for the live stream? I have carefully observed the camera angle of the live broadcast room. With my position as the standard, there are no blind spots hundreds of meters in the air. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find anything like a camera. I thought about this problem for a long time, but I still couldn't figure out the principle behind your live broadcast. Until today, when I found this thing, it gave me inspiration. Jiang Pingji tossed the yin-yang jade pendant in her hand. A faint smile hung at the corner of her lips. As a virtual creature, I think you should be familiar with it. Just now, when I activated this thing, I realized that my view had changed to a high altitude. What's more coincidental is that when the view zoomed in, it coincided with the camera angle of the live broadcast room. System, do you have anything to say about this? The system, which was originally bold and confident, was now as quiet as a chicken. It didn't make a sound. Jiang Pingji said with certainty, "You have a carrier. I will find it sooner or later." As mentioned earlier, the life structure of virtual creatures was not stable. If they left their original environment, it was like fish leaving water. They wouldn't live long at all. The so-called carrier was like a fish tank filled with water and oxygen. With it, wouldn't the fish jump around? Jiang Pingji had two plans to deal with the system. The first was to restore her brain to its peak state and fight the main system head-on. But this method wasn't reliable. Who knew how many pieces the main system would cut her into? If she accidentally let a few subsystems escape, she would be fine, but she was afraid that something would happen to the people around her. The second was to destroy the carrier that the system was attached to. Even if she ignored it, both the subsystem and the main system wouldn't live long. In comparison, the second plan was easier and more perfect. But where was the carrier? According to the system's cunning character, it would definitely hide such a fatal thing well and wouldn't let people find it easily. The system was silent again. Rather than saying it was silent resistance, it was more like sitting and waiting for death. Because it knew that no matter what it said, it couldn't mislead Jiang Pingji. If it was the main system, it could still fight with Jiang Pingji head-on. Both of them had a 50-50 chance of winning. But it was only a subsystem that was split from the main system. At most, it could fool the inexperienced transmigrators or aborigines. Deceive Jiang Pingji? Didn't you see that it had been imprisoned by the other party all these years? Jiang Pingji didn't care. No matter what the system's reaction was, it was her prisoner. It wanted to fight with her at such a low level. It didn't take her seriously at all. But before dealing with the main system, she felt that she could capture the small fish and shrimp first. Jiang Pingji closed her eyes again and used her spirit to probe the yin-yang jade pendant according to the previous steps. Soon she discovered a strange cyclone. In layman's terms, the yin-yang jade pendant was actually a terminal and login port for the spiritual network. Only when one's spirit was strong enough could they log into the spiritual network. Ordinary people didn't have a strong mental brain. They could only increase the time they spent with the jade pendant and passively adapt. The so-called psychic dream was actually entering the spiritual network in an unconscious state. But Jiang Pingji was different. When the cyclone appeared, she didn't resist. She let the cyclone pull her spirit into it. Because she was mentally prepared, she wasn't surprised when the sky and clouds appeared in front of her. Instead, she followed the red line and fell to the ground. Not long after, the scenery on the ground kept magnifying in front of her. She thought of an old friend. This old friend that she hadn't seen for a long time was none other than the transmigrator who had sneaked into Wanzhou. She had changed her face again. She had disguised herself as a young woman who had escaped and blended in with a group of refugees. Jiang Pengji could clearly see what was happening on the ground and hear their voices, but the people on the ground were completely unaware. She focused her attention on the young woman. Chapter 8:33. If the transmigrator's previous disguise was full of flaws, then this one could barely be rated 60 out of 100. System. Can I really get close to Lu Shi like this? The transmigrator, who was disguised as a refugee, squatted in a corner and pretended to take a nap, but in reality, she was talking to the system residing in her body. After a while, the system's indifferent electronic voice entered her ears. It was flat and emotionless. For now, sneaking into Wanzhou as a refugee is the safest option. Dongqing has been at war for years, creating countless refugees. The refugee population is huge. If you take the opportunity to blend in, you won't be discovered. What's more, Wanzhou is still recruiting a large number of refugees to work as laborers. This is a great opportunity. The system originally thought that the stupid host was easy to control, but sometimes the host was too stupid, and it felt aggrieved. The transmigrator bit her lower lip. She also knew that disguising as a refugee to sneak into Wanzhou was the best option, but after experiencing it for herself, she felt uncomfortable. She thought that fleeing refugees were like those in TV dramas, wearing tattered clothes and walking in groups of 2s and 3s. It wasn't difficult at all. However, reality had taught her a harsh lesson, telling her what it was like to be a refugee in a war. Can I just teleport to Wanzhou? The transmigrator curled up her body and tried to reduce her presence, but she still felt several pairs of eyes staring at her. Some looked at her like she was food, while others treated her like merchandise. No matter what kind of gaze it was, she felt a deep sense of humiliation. The system snorted coldly and said in a mocking tone, "Host, I don't think I need to remind you again. You're now carrying a huge debt, and your reputation is in the red. Unless it's a critical moment, the popularity points mall won't allow you to go into debt again." In other words, if the transmigrator wanted to sneak into Wanzhou, she would have to rely on her superior martial arts skills and directly sneak in by crossing the mountains. However, if she chose this method, it was very likely that she would be discovered. It would be fine if she was an ordinary person, but if she was discovered by Jiang Pengji, then she would be finished. Not only was the transmigrator afraid of Jiang Pengji, but even the system attached to her was deeply afraid and didn't dare to let its guard down. After thinking about it, disguising as a refugee to sneak into Wanzhou was the safest way. Of course, there was another reason. The livestream viewers were tired of all kinds of large-scale livestreams. She needed to change her style. Rather than saying that the audience was tired of the live broadcast content, it was better to say that the previous live broadcast content could not make the local tycoons continue to pay. Ever since she was saddled with a huge debt, her daily live broadcast time was extended from the original 4 hours to 24 hours. But for some reason, most of the rich husbands, who used to spend a lot of money on her, were nowhere to be seen. A few of them only watched the live broadcast and did not give her any tips. What was the difference between this behavior and freeloading? If she did not receive a large number of tips, and only relied on her daily quota of popularity points, when would she be able to accumulate enough to repay her debt? The transmigrator secretly clenched her teeth. Her heart was filled with hatred, but she had no choice but to put down her pride to please the rich audience. In her previous life, she was just a small online streamer. In order to make a living, she had to live stream dancing or chatting with others in a small room every day to please the rich audience. Ever since she had the system as her golden finger, she had become a nouveau riche who came to fawn over her with money. In her previous life and this life, The two completely different situations made her feel complacent, giving her a sense of superiority that looked down on all living things. She could no longer remember how long it had been since she took the initiative to ask for tips. In the past 2 months, she had been condescending to please the rich, asking for tips from the audience in a roundabout way. She even used the methods she used to lure rich men, secretly provoking the rich men to fight each other. Who knew that the rich men who used to throw money at her did not buy it? Even when she personally asked for tips, they only gave her a few small coins as a token. There was no trace of the splendor they used to throw money at her for a smile. Faced with this embarrassing situation, the transmigrator and the system discussed it carefully and agreed that the audience was just tired of the aesthetic. Since the large-scale content was unable to attract the audience's eyes, the transmigrator planned to use her talent to conquer them. When she first transmigrated, she had spent a lot of popularity points to exchange for many talent and skill books from the system. She had mastered all 4 of them. If she transmigrated back now, she would definitely become an artist who would shock the world. Unexpectedly, on the first day she changed the content of her live broadcast, the bullet screen was full of ridicule and criticism. She's obviously a silver doll who can sleep with anyone. She thinks she's a pure and clean fairy. Methanol. What kind of song is she playing? Instead of showing off her talent here, why don't you strip naked and play 18? That's more interesting. What the hell is she dressed up like? I really don't know what kind of goddess a prostitute is pretending to be. We're here to watch you be a life teacher, not to watch you show off your talent. What kind of thing are you playing? Let's go, it's getting more and more boring. Haha, is this the legendary example of being a prostitute and maintaining a chastity memorial arch? The transmigrator saw the screen full of ridicule and was so angry that she could not even hold the pipa in her arms steadily. She closed the live broadcast in a rage and threw the pipa to the ground. She was so angry that her eyes were red, making her look lovely. She felt humiliated. Little did she know that the audience had already formed an impression of her and the live broadcast. This was a brothel that sold prostitutes. Although everyone was equal, regardless of the era, people looked down on the occupation of a prostitute. The transmigrator was labeled as such by the audience. Once she put on all her clothes and showed off her talent, in the eyes of the audience, her image would collapse. If they wanted to see a specialized classical art performance, the audience would naturally go to other live broadcast rooms, even if the talent of those live broadcasts was far inferior to hers. The viewers who came to this live broadcast room were here for the large amount of meat. And the result? Their minds were fantasizing about big fish and meat, but in the end, they were served a bowl of porridge and side dishes. What made the audience even angrier was that before they could leave while cursing, the transmigrator had already closed the live broadcast. But what the hell? What right did a piece of trash with her legs spread to be unreasonable here? The transmigrator was thick-skinned. Faced with a huge debt, she could only open the live broadcast room again after being unreasonable for 2 days. However, this time, she did not put on a large-scale performance, nor did she deliberately show off her talent. Instead, she opened the live broadcast room to do her own thing. After experiencing the previous failure, she did not embarrass herself this time. After a careful discussion with the system, the transmigrator decided to wait and see what kind of content could arouse the interest of the audience, so that they would be willing to spend money for her. This went on for several days. At first, the audience was very impatient, but they gradually calmed down. Soon, the transmigrator was surprised to find that the daily decrease in the amount of donations began to increase again. She looked at the donations from the audience and found out that they were sympathizing with the refugees who left their homes and escaped from the war. Chapter 8:34. In her previous life, the girl from another world was just an internet celebrity. As an internet celebrity, she had an internet celebrity face, Korean semi-permanent eyebrows, an all face, and European double eyelids. She did not look outstanding without any makeup, but after putting on makeup, her face was still very pretty. However, although her face was pretty, it did not have any memorable features. There were tens of thousands of internet celebrities like her, and everyone wanted to stand out, but standing out was not an easy task. In order to gain popularity, she often posted weird comments on Weibo. Every trending topic had her comment, and she even slandered a few celebrities who had a bit of fame but did not have many fans. She was the fan who was bullied, and she used it to gain attention and attract trending topics. In her previous life, for the sake of being popular, she would do anything and become a fly that everyone hated. Now, for the sake of the audience's rewards and enthusiasm, she did not mind using refugees to eat their human blood buns. However, when she really disguised herself as a refugee and mixed in with them, she realized that the drama had lied to her. "I know I can't buy on credit anymore, but..." As she said that, she frowned in disgust. The system asked her unhappily, "But what? Can't you just say everything in one go?" Facing the system's bad attitude, the girl felt indignant, but she did not dare to resist. She could only curse in her heart. "But these refugees are not good people. Didn't you notice that they..." The girl wanted to say something but stopped. Thinking about what she had seen and heard these days, her stomach could not help but turn and her throat felt like vomiting. These days, she had seen lone women being bullied more than once. If she did not have peerless martial arts, she might have been dragged to a corner and bullied by the male refugees. In comparison, robbing, stealing, hurting, and human trafficking were all small matters. Some refugees were so hungry that they would steal other people's children, kill them, and cook them. Some even ate them raw. Most of the refugees had numb and lifeless eyes, as if they were walking corpses. The girl felt that she had not mixed into a group of refugees, but had clearly mixed into hell, and the refugees around her were all evil spirits. The system snorted coldly. It was clearly an electronic voice, but the girl could still hear its disdain and ridicule. "Who told you that refugees are good people?" The time traveler was stunned for a moment. She stammered, but they are all humans. They actually eat human flesh. It's so disgusting. The people of ancient times were supposed to be simple, kind, ignorant, and vulgar. Regardless of the label, they should not be so devoid of humanity. As expected of the ignorant ancient times, the quality was really low. Fortunately, she could return to her own world. The system was shocked by the woman's words, and then it was speechless for a long time. "Please, this is a time of war," it said sarcastically. "Look at them, they don't have enough to eat, they don't have warm clothes, they're sallow and skinny, their clothes are ragged, they look like black people from afar." They were now on the run, not on the run. When human nature becomes vile, even Buddha can't enlighten them. Do you expect them to talk about the 8 honors and 8 shames at this time and learn the core values of socialism? The transmigrator was speechless, not knowing how to refute. After a while, the system said, "It is human nature to sympathize with the weak. The more miserable the refugees are, the more benefits you will get." The audience in the streaming room sympathized with the refugees who had suffered miserably. The transmigrator also told the audience that their rewards could be converted into money, rice, and cloth in this world. Therefore, the rewards during this period of time were like the opening of a dam. It was even more than during the peak period. Hearing the system say that, the transmigrator bit her lower lip and reluctantly accepted her fate. Although these refugees could bring her benefits, she really did not want to mix with them. It was so dirty. It was dirty and smelly. The surrounding air was polluted by the sour stench of their bodies. Apart from that, there was another reason that she could not stand it. She was a beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. How could she be coveted by just anyone? The gazes of the surrounding refugees disgusted her. She could not wait to dig out their eyeballs one by one. The transmigrator talked to the system in her heart. The audience in the streaming room did not notice any clues and continued to squander their sympathy. However, even if the audience in the streaming room could not hear it, it did not mean that Jiang Pengji could not hear it. She floated in midair and watched everything. She even heard the whispers between the transmigrator and the system. She suddenly laughed out of anger. She had seen many shameless people, but it was her first time seeing someone so shameless. At that moment, the transmigrator below complained to the system again. "Although the rewards are a lot, it won't last long. It can't be used to exchange for the debt. The system said, so you have to work harder in streaming to repay the debt. I'm already working very hard. The transmigrator gritted her teeth and thought of a plan. System, why don't you ease the debt first? If my streaming room can be upgraded to another level, then I can earn more points in installments. Sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood. Just agree to it. The transmigrator's streaming room had been upgraded to level 6. It could currently accommodate 700,000 viewers. If Jiang Pingji had not interfered and caused her to bear a huge debt, the streaming room might have been upgraded to level 7. The maximum number of viewers would have expanded to 1,500,700,000 viewers. That was 700,000 popularity points. She split the points with the system, but she only received 350,000 points. Even with the viewers' rewards, the accumulation speed was still too slow. If the streaming room could be upgraded to another level, the maximum number of viewers would reach 1.5 million. Then she would receive 750,000 points in a day. The system said flatly, no. The transmigrator was angry. She muttered that the system was stingy and did not see the big picture. When Jiang Pingji saw this, she suddenly felt bored. She memorized her surroundings and exited the spiritual network. When she opened her eyes, the scene in front of her changed from the suburbs to the district headquarters. Jiang Pingji got up and glanced at the topographic map of Wanzhou. She roughly calculated the transmigrator's current location. She silently calculated the distance of the refugees and sneered in her heart. TSK? I'll let you be free and unfettered for a few more days. Jiang Pingji summoned Su Ku and asked him, have there been any unusual movements outside of Wanzhou recently? There were a lot fewer refugees in Wanzhou. Shangjing was being rebuilt and could provide a lot of jobs for the refugees. The refugees that Jiang Pingji had seen just now should have flooded in from outside Wanzhou. The refugees meant that social security was in chaos. If they were not properly settled down, there might be other disasters. Suke thought about it and remembered some news. His face could not help but become more solemn. He said, the rescue of the emperor has just ended. Most of the vassals have returned to their respective territories. They haven't had the time to cause trouble. However, there are 2 places that have become chaotic. 2 places? Where? Jiang Pingji asked. Suku replied, one is Wulong County in Haozhou. Now there's no leader. The relatives of the former county chief are fighting for power. The other place is Dongmen County in Jiangzhou. My lord, we received news this morning that the county chief of Dongmen County, Yang Jian, has been poisoned. What? Chapter 8:35. Yang Jian was dead? But before the end of the alliance meeting, Yang Jian was still fine. When she heard the news of his death, Jiang Pingji almost couldn't react. She pursed her lips. Her dark, starry eyes were filled with doubt. Suke had said that Yang Jian had been poisoned and killed. Poisoned? Which enemy did it? Jiang Pingji didn't know much about Yang Jian. She only knew that he had a relationship with her father, but she didn't know much else. If it wasn't an enemy, why would they resort to such a despicable method? Suku said, according to the news, it seems to be done by the aristocrats of Dongmen County. Jiang Pingji's expression turned cold. She asked, are you sure it's the local aristocrats of Dongmen County? Suku answered, this matter? I think it's very likely. Other than the prominent aristocrats, the other aristocrats don't have much confidence. Zhangzhou is Prince Changshuo's fief, and these aristocrats make a living on his territory. For the sake of their family's glory and continuity, they naturally have to take measures to protect themselves. Prince Changshuo is already the emperor, but Yang Jian resolutely joined the army to rescue the emperor. Isn't this clearly opposing Prince Changshuo? If Yang Jian is killed, not only will they be able to move away a huge obstacle, but they can also use it to surrender to Prince Changshuo. Yang Jian joining the army to rescue the emperor was one thing, but the alliance army didn't do anything, so they didn't completely kill Prince Changshuo. Jiang Pengji thought about it carefully, her furrowed brows never relaxing. Su Ku's speculation seemed to be correct. but he seemed to have some misunderstandings about the aristocrats. That shouldn't be the reason. The aristocrats indeed liked to seek benefits and avoid harm, but they preferred to be wise and play safe, watching the people below them fight. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. That was what they liked the most. Why would they personally poison Yang Jian and assassinate him at this time? To surrender to Prince Changshu, it was logical to assassinate Yang Jian, but it didn't fit the style of the aristocrats. Su Ku was puzzled. He humbly asked, "Then who do you think did it, my lord?" Jiang Pengji revealed a faint smile, but her eyes were tinged with sharpness. It could be the aristocrats, but it most likely wasn't to surrender to Prince Changshu. It's more likely to be a personal grudge. Su Ku was surprised and took a deep breath. A personal grudge? Jiang Pengji sneered meaningfully. This time, Yang Jian has contributed greatly to the rescue of the emperor. Now that Yang Jian's power had grown, the first to act would naturally be his enemies. It was possible that they would try to assassinate him first. Su Ku sighed. Regardless of whether it was the work of the landowning households or the enemy, it was a pity that a hero like Yang Jian had died in such a manner. Although Zhangzhou was a land of abundant resources and abundant people, Prince Changshu was not good at governing and liked to squander, so the people in the prefectures of Zhangzhou did not have an easy time. The common people were having a hard time, and the landowning households that treated them like sheep to be fleeced naturally weren't any better off. Yang Jian's temperament was rather unyielding, but for the sake of the people he was willing to bend over backwards. Back in the day, when Dongmen County experienced several natural disasters, he was the one who had shamelessly borrowed food from his neighbor, Lu Shi, who was also the county chief of Hu County. Even when he was rejected, he could still put on a nonchalant smile. If not for Yang Jian, who knew how many people in Dongmen Commandery would have died? Jiang Pengji's tone was calm as she said, "It was a pity that he died young." Although the landowning households in Dongmen Commandery did not like Yang Jian, they still needed him as a shield. Why would they kill him so easily? Wanzhou and Zhangzhou were very far apart, so news traveled slowly. But she was right about one thing. Yang Jian was not killed by the alliance of the landowning households. Instead, he was sought by his enemies. Previously, during the rescue of the emperor, Yang Jian still had an arrow wound on his body. Although the wound was not fatal, he still needed to rest and recuperate. However, in order to render a meritorious service, Yang Jian gave it his all. After the rescue of the emperor, the arrow wound on his body opened up again. It took him nearly a month to recover. Yang Jian brought his troops back to Dongmen Commandery in Zhangzhou. Immediately, he was invited to a banquet by the landowning households, big and small. In a short period of time, he became a popular figure. With Prince Changshu becoming the emperor, everyone was unsure. Naturally, they thought of ways to get some information from Yang Jian. Yang Jian told them the truth and even revealed his ambition. Prince Changshu had brought more than 100,000 troops to besiege Qinzhou. After fighting for a year, he did not manage to conquer Qinzhou. Instead, he ran out of ammunition and rations and suffered heavy casualties. If not for the interference of the Meng family in Sangzhou, Prince Changshu would not have been able to become the emperor. He would have packed his bags and returned to his fief in Zhangzhou. Although Prince Changshu had become the emperor, most of his troops belonged to the Meng family, not him. Yang Jian made a great contribution during the rescue of the emperor and received many benefits. He rushed back to Dongmen Commandery in Zhangzhou in advance. He wanted to use this opportunity to unite the landowning households and take drastic measures. He wanted to take advantage of Prince Changshu's weakness to bring him down. Who knew that his painstaking efforts would be ruined in the hands of his enemies? In the end, he died with a grievance. When he died, he was in extreme pain. His lips were black, blood flowed from his orifices, his pupils were dilated, and his body convulsed for a day and a night before it gradually cooled down. Such a tragic scene, not to mention witnessing it with one's own eyes, even hearing about it was enough to send chills down one's spine. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and looked at Su Ku. So, Yang Tao took over Yang Jian's business? Su Ku muttered to himself for a while, then said, Of course it was Yang Jian's only son who took over. But he's still young. I'm afraid he won't be able to control the situation. As the only son, Yang Tao naturally took over everything from Yang Jian. But he was young and inexperienced, so he couldn't control the old official. The landowning households in Dongmen Commandery were uneasy, the old official was arrogant and despotic, and there was still Prince Changsho, the big trouble. Without Yang Jian to protect him, Yang Tao suddenly faced so much pressure that he almost couldn't breathe. But he couldn't fall. He had to arrange a proper funeral for his father. He was like a blind man walking in an unfamiliar wilderness. Thorns and rocks were everywhere under his feet. After Yang Jian's death, there was no one to protect him from the wind and rain. My lord, Lin is here. You can focus on handling the old lord's funeral. You don't have to worry about anything else. Yan Lin was dressed in plain clothes with a white cloth tied around his waist. He knelt behind Yang Tao and kept vigil with him. After 7 days, Yang Tao had lost a lot of weight. The clothes that originally fitted him were now empty, and it was especially unbearable to look at. Yang Tao had cried for a few days. Now his eyes were red, swollen, and bloodshot. His eyes were dry, and he couldn't shed any more tears. On the day Yang Jian was poisoned, he stayed in the house and took care of him day and night, but there was nothing he could do. Looking at his father, who had always loved him dearly, in agony before his death, he wished he could take his place. If it weren't for the support of someone reliable, Yang Tao might have collapsed a long time ago. Chapter 8:36. The last sentence was squeezed out from Yang Tao's molars. The hatred in his words was thick and deep. Yan Lin looked down, a murderous glint in his eyes. That day will come. He moved his lips and said gently, "You don't have to thank me, my lord. This is what I should do." Even though they weren't biological brothers, they were very close, even more than blood brothers. Yan Lin wasn't only Yang Tao's best friend, but he was also his caretaker. After taking care of a kid for so many years, Yan Lin had long developed the habit of taking care of Yang Tao. As for Zhao Xiao, Yan Lin secretly suppressed his anger. There was no rush. One day he would grind his bones to dust. Zhao Xiao was a famous scholar in Dongmen County. Zhao Xiao was from a noble family in Dongmen County. He was sinister, vicious, and vengeful. Speaking of his feud with Yang Jian, it could be traced back to more than 10 years ago. One of Zhao Xiao's brothers was killed by the young Yang Jian in the village, and the two became enemies. Years later, the conflict and hatred between the two deepened. When Zhao Xiao heard that Yang Jian had benefited from protecting the emperor, he was afraid that Yang Jian would gain power and kill him, so he decided to strike first. Poor Yang Jian was defenseless, and with the arrow wound on his body, he was tortured by a cup of poisoned wine for an entire night before he breathed his last. Dongmen County was located at the border of Zhangzhou, in the south. It was next to Hu County and separated from Wanzhou by mountains and rivers. In other words, the refugees she saw on the spiritual network were not from Dongmen County. Jiang Pingji rubbed her brows and organized her thoughts. She then asked Su Ku, "Wulong County in Haozhou is without a leader. All the forces are fighting each other. Is it bad?" Su Ku answered, "It's bad. I feel sorry for the homeless people." Wulong County was not far from Wanzhou. Without a doubt, the refugees Jiang Pingji saw came from there. At this point, there were only 3 ways to stabilize Wulong County. First, Jiang Pingji could use the only son of Wulong County as a puppet to control the place from afar. However, this option had been rejected long ago. It was not suitable for the time being. Second, she could wait for the internal strife in Wulong County to come to an end. This was definitely a bad idea. The longer the infighting dragged on, the more the local people would suffer. Jiang Pingji took a deep breath and made up her mind. Before the attack on Jiamen Pass, Jiang Pingji and her strategists had carefully analyzed the whereabouts of the orphans from Wulong County. After some discussion, they unanimously decided to use the orphans of Wulong County in exchange for some benefits, giving the highly sought-after Wulong County to Huang Song. But why hadn't there been any movement from Huang Song's side? She frowned as she thought about it. When Suku saw this, he couldn't help but ask with concern, "What are you worried about, my lord?" "It's nothing. You can go and do your own things first." Seeing that Suku still wanted to say something, Jiang Pingji said, "I want to be alone. No matter what it is, let's talk about it tomorrow." "Xiaoyu, I'm tired." Since Jiang Pingji had said so, Suku could not force her. When Suku bowed and left, Jiang Pingji heaved a sigh of relief. She leaned back on the mat and closed her eyes. She looked like she was taking a nap, but she was actually poking at the system in her heart. The system was annoyed. Jiang Pingji asked, "System, do you have any way to upgrade the streaming room?" The system knew that it was doomed, but it would be better to live for another day. It knew that it would be safe until the system's main body was captured. "Just let me out. Your authority is very low. Without me, you won't be able to upgrade the streaming room by yourself." Jiang Pingji secretly raised her eyebrows and sneered. "Is there no other way?" The system was confused. It didn't know why she asked that. Of course not. The system was puzzled. Wasn't the host always on guard against me? Why didn't it let me upgrade the streaming room? Why did it suddenly mention upgrading the streaming room today? Jiang Pingji asked it with a smile. "If I take away the subsystem from that woman, will the two subsystems merge?" To make an analogy, the complete system was a glass of water. It poured some water into other glasses and separated them into different subsystems. So, if the subsystem was captured, could it merge the two glasses of water? Theoretically, it should be possible, right? The system remained silent, and Jiang Pingji didn't expect it to answer. After a while, Jiang Pingji went to disturb the system again. The system was furious. "Damn, are you done?" "Yes, it is." Young people can't keep their cool. The system couldn't bear it anymore and said, "Get lost." The other subordinates were so busy that they kicked the back of their heads. This unreliable lord was slacking off and sleeping here. Wasn't she afraid that the subordinates would rebel against her? The system was angry. There were people following such a stupid person who exploited other people's labor, and all of them were so damn loyal. They were blind. At the same time, at the border of Wanzhou, a few carriages with simple decorations slowly drove to the pass. The wheels squeaked as they rolled forward in circles. The official road leading to Wanzhou had been in disrepair for years. It was rugged and bumpy, making it difficult to travel. The carriages swayed along with it. "Mr. Cheng, the pass is up ahead." There were dozens of guards outside the carriage. The man in the lead was riding a tall horse. Although the man was dressed in casual linen clothes, his body was broad and his muscles were strong. He was like a hard brown stone. Even his loose clothes were full and bulging from his muscles. The man rode forward to the carriage in the middle of the group and slowed down. At that moment, the curtain of the carriage was lifted by a slender hand, revealing half of the man's face. "There are more and more refugees outside. Do they want to go to Wanzhou too?" The person who spoke was none other than Huang Song's strategist, Qing Jing. He was sitting upright in the carriage with a bamboo scroll filled with small characters on his lap. After traveling for dozens of days, he looked a lot thinner, and there were bruises under his eyes. "I've asked. They're all refugees who want to go to Wanzhou." Qing Jing lowered his eyelids and said softly, "Is that so?" As he said this, he lowered the curtain to block out the dazzling orange sunlight outside. Qing Jing had been ordered by Huang Song to personally negotiate with Wanzhou about the ownership of the only son of the Wulong County chief of Haozhou. If Huang Song wanted to unify Haozhou, he needed a good reason. If he could control the orphan of the Wulong County chief of Haozhou, he could naturally send troops in the name of recovering his deceased father's inheritance. This was also one of Qing Jing's reasons for coming. Originally, this mission should have been Feng Ju's. After all, Feng Ju and Feng Jin were biological brothers, and it was easier to negotiate with biological brothers. However, in order to avoid arousing suspicion, Qing Jing took over Feng Ju's mission in the end. After all, Feng Ju was also the third son of the Feng family's favored wife. If the forces in Wanzhou suspected that they had sent Feng Ju to negotiate on the surface, but secretly had him contact the Feng family, that would be terrible. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, they had to substitute Qing Jing at the last minute. After leaving Huang Song's territory, the world outside was desolate. There was no sound of chickens and dogs barking at each other. When they reached the border of Wanzhou, they could see groups of refugees from time to time. Cheng Jing was meticulous and thoughtful. Chapter 837. Cheng Jing's entourage traveled for a while. More refugees appeared in front of them. The tall man's expression darkened. He raised his hand and ordered the guards to surround the carriages to prevent Cheng Jing from being offended by the refugees. He had thought that the situation would improve slightly at the pass, but he didn't expect to see so many refugees outside. In an instant, the man's face turned green. "Mr. Cheng, I'm afraid we can't get through." Cheng Jing frowned when he felt the carriage stop. He raised his hand to lift the bamboo curtain and asked the man on the horse outside, "Huan Shu, what's going on?" The man on the horse was called Yuan Chong. His courtesy name was Heng Shu. He was a capable general under Huang Song and had been sent to escort Cheng Jing. Hearing Cheng Jing's question, Yuan Chong hurriedly clamped the horse's belly and made it move a few steps forward until it was level with the window. Yuan Chong said respectfully, "Mr. Cheng, there are refugees gathered at the pass ahead. I'm afraid we won't be able to get through for a while." Cheng Jing didn't do something as rude as sticking his head out of the window. Instead, he ordered the driver to stop and got out of the carriage. He was shocked when he saw the scene in front of him. He knew that the refugees from Wulong County had all gone to Wanzhou, but he didn't expect there to be so many. From what he could see, there were at least 1,000 refugees. Yuan Chong jumped off the horse and walked to Cheng Jing's side. Lu Shi is too careless to allow so many refugees to gather outside Wanzhou Pass. With so many refugees, it was easy to cause trouble. If these refugees were incited, there was no telling what they would do. Yuan Chong couldn't help but frown when he saw so many refugees gathering outside Wanzhou Pass, and even more refugees gathering here. The sun in the sky was as hot as fire, causing the ground to be covered in mist. Anyone who casually wiped their face would find their palms covered in greasy sweat. The sun made them feel irritated and powerless. Yes, they're all refugees. No one knew what Cheng Jing was thinking, but he subconsciously responded. Yuan Chong didn't disturb Cheng Jing. Instead, he crooked his finger at the guard beside him. The guard understood and immediately took out a paper umbrella from another carriage and handed it to Yuan Chong. Yuan Chong took the paper umbrella and opened it to cover Cheng Jing's head from the sun. A military general's skin was coarse and thick, and he could take a beating and fall, but a scholar always wore a scholarly gown. He looked elegant and delicate, and needed to be carefully served. Noticing the shadow above his head, Cheng Jing only raised his gaze slightly. He did not decline or thank her. "Mr. Cheng, this general will send someone to inquire about it. Let's see the situation first," Yuan Chong suggested, and Cheng Jing nodded in agreement. It's good to send someone to ask. He wanted to know how these refugees would be settled in Wanzhou. If they weren't settled well, these refugees would become thorny tumors. This general will do it right away. In terms of official positions, Cheng Jing and Yuan Chong were equal, and the latter did not need to be humble. However, even their lord, Huang Song, was so respectful to the strategists that his subordinates naturally followed suit and did not dare to slight them. Yuan Chong was one of the more good-tempered generals. When he was young, he loved to read and did not have the bad habits of ordinary martial artists. If it were someone else, perhaps they would complain about the delicacy of scholars and the fact that they had to stop for a while. However, Yuan Chong would not. On the contrary, he respected Cheng Jing very much. Not long after, the soldier who was sent out to investigate returned. Cheng Jing called the soldier over and asked him carefully, "What's the situation at the pass?" The soldier answered truthfully. As he asked and answered, Cheng Jing's expression became more and more solemn, which attracted Yuan Chong's attention. "Sir, is there something wrong?" Yuan Chong carefully recalled what the soldier had just said and could not think of anything that could make Cheng Jing so serious. Cheng Jing could not withstand the heat. He had his own rules and regulations. No matter how hot the weather was, he wore his scholarly robes tightly, and his sleeves could cover half his fingers. Now that he was outside the carriage, even with a paper umbrella over his head to block the sun, he was still sweating from the heat. "There's something wrong." Cheng Jing's voice was a little weak and full of solemnity. Yuan Chong was suspicious. At this moment he was like a monk scratching his head. No matter how he thought about it, he could not figure out what was wrong. Although his IQ could make him look superior to ordinary generals, he could not keep up with a brain expert even if he used all his strength. Yuan Chong was puzzled. "I'm stupid. I really can't figure it out. Please enlighten me, sir." Cheng Jing explained. "Just now, the soldier said that Wanzhou will send people to register the refugees at the pass and carefully ask them about their origins, birthplace, age, and family. They will select them one by one based on their family, gender, and age. They will then form groups of 100 and bring them into the pass." Yuan Chong nodded and said, "I just think that this method is a little stupid. Not only is it a waste of time, but it's also tiring." Cheng Jing shook his head and said, "Waste of time? Not necessarily. As for whether it's tiring or not, it's hard to say. Registering the refugees is indeed beneficial to management. When a large number of refugees gather together, it's easy to cause trouble. If someone is sincere in stirring up trouble, it will inevitably bring trouble to Wanzhou." Wanzhou did not ignore the refugees. Instead, they sent people to register the refugees at the pass and then brought them into the pass in batches. Isn't this also surveillance? Now, people are needed everywhere in Wanzhou. These refugees came at the right time. Bring the refugees to places where people are needed so that they can work there. However, Yuan Chang's thoughts went astray. He thought of forced labor, and a look of pity appeared on his face. The refugees were willing to leave their homes to escape the flames of war and protect the lives of their families. But forced labor was too hard, and it was often a narrow escape from death. It was probably much scarier than the flames of war. Yuan Chong really couldn't figure it out. Why did these refugees gather in Wanzhou? He voiced his doubts, but Cheng Jing smiled bitterly. "You're wrong. Forced labor in Wanzhou is different from other places." Cheng Jing and Feng Zhen knew each other. The two of them had successfully gone from pen pals to real friends during the alliance meeting. Although their positions were different, as long as they didn't mention official matters, they could still maintain a private friendship. Through Feng Zhen's words, Cheng Jing knew that forced labor in Wanzhou was not free or unpaid. It was more like an employer and a laborer. You contribute, and I contribute money and food. It's an equal exchange. Once the refugees were uprooted, they were like duckweed without roots. Not only could Wanzhou provide a stable place to live, but it could also provide work and food. It was simply a holy land in the hearts of the refugees. When Yuan Chong heard this, he couldn't help but be speechless. If we were to distribute money and food to the people doing forced labor, how much money would that cost? Cheng Jing lowered his eyes and said, "Lu Shi doesn't lack money." Yuan Chong nodded in agreement. "That's true. Lu Shi's father, Lu Shi, still secretly controls Hu County. He does indeed not lack money." Cheng Jing looked at the slowly moving crowd of refugees in the distance. They were crowded together in a dense mass, and they looked like black algae. Although the workload of registering refugees was great, the benefits that followed were endless. The most direct benefit was that the risk of a refugee riot was reduced. Another benefit was that the labor of these refugees could be used reasonably. Yuan Chong, who was beside him, said, "But, even so, sir, you shouldn't look so pale." Chapter 8:38. Yuan Chong said, "This? I know." Cheng Jing asked again, "Do you think Wulong County is closer to Maota County or Wanzhou?" Wulong County and Maota County were neighbors, but to get to Wanzhou, one had to cross a third of the state. It would take 1 to 2 months on foot. Yuan Chong said naturally, "Of course Maota County is closer." Cheng Jing smiled bitterly and asked, "Since Maota County is closer, why did the refugees come to Wanzhou? If the refugees went to Maota County, they would be leaving their homes, but they would still be in the same state. A few. But they went to Wanzhou, which was near Haozhou." This was thought-provoking. Yuan Chong finally realized something was wrong, and his expression changed. He said, "Someone is playing tricks? Damn it, how could this be?" The governor of Mauda County was Yuan Chang's lord, Huang Song. At the same time, Huang Song was Yuan Chang's cousin. Huang Song's ancestors had been prominent for a while, but because of poor management by his descendants, they slowly withered. Huang Song's surname was Yuan. His grandfather died when he was young. Because the family was poor, the clan could not take care of Huang Song's grandmother, who was young and widowed. In order to survive, Huang Song's grandmother could only remarry her ex-husband's son to the emperor's favorite, Secretary Huang Tan. Huang Tan was a eunuch, but Huang Song's father was very sweet and gradually won Huang Tan's favor. He changed his surname and adopted him as a stepson, continuing the Huang family line. Later, with Huang Tan's help, Huang Song's father gradually became successful. He married and had children, and even helped the family. By Huang Song's generation, the Yuan family's situation had improved. Coincidentally, Huang Song was short of people, so he reached out to help the younger generation of the family. This was why Yuan Chong came to serve Huang Song. Huang Song was Yuan Chang's idol, and Yuan Chong was Huang Song's diehard fan. How could a diehard fan tolerate hearing that his idol had been schemed against? Cheng Jing saw through Yuan Chang's honest thoughts and said in amusement, "Playing tricks? Not really." This was a normal confrontation. Cheng Jing could only say that he was not as skilled as Wei Si and could not blame his opponent for being treacherous. Today, Cheng Jing still did not know that in terms of playing with people's hearts and public opinion, which strategist in the world could beat Wei Si. Cheng Jing asked about it in detail. The refugees had all come to Wanzhou because they had heard about how great Wanzhou was from their relatives. As for how these relatives knew about this, well, in reality, they had only heard about it through hearsay. There was no way to find out the source of the rumors. Wei Si had not only set a trap for Huang Song, he had cast a wide net and spread the news everywhere, subtly influencing the people to brainwash and promote his lord. Do you still remember that Wei Si's pen name is Zaiqi? Wei Si had suffered a loss in his previous life. In this life, he naturally had to control the steering wheel of public opinion early on and become an experienced driver. Gossiping was originally a means of public opinion. Luring children to sing nursery rhymes, hiring hooligans to spread the word, and letting wandering knights who traveled from the south to the north sell their products everywhere. These were all means of public opinion. It seemed inconspicuous, but it would play a huge role in crucial times. Wulong County was neither near nor far from Wanzhou. The people had been uprooted by the flames of war. When they thought about where it would be safer to turn to, the first thing that came to mind was Wanzhou. 1 or 2 refugees were nothing, but when the surrounding people all leaned toward Wanzhou, the blind obedience in people's bones would come into play. One group of refugees led another group of refugees, and like a rolling snowball, the refugee group grew larger and larger until it developed to the scale it was today. Out of 100 refugees, at least 60% were willing to give up what was close at hand and seek what was far away, choosing Wanzhou. To be honest, Cheng Jing should be the scapegoat. As Huang Song's strategist, he could not plan everything for his lord. Instead, he let people take advantage of a loophole. He really should not have done that. What was even more frustrating was that Huang Song now had a favor to ask of Wanzhou, so he could not flare up at all. He could only pinch his nose and accept it. The refugees had legs, and no one else could decide for them where they wanted to go except for the refugees themselves. Being unable to attract the refugees was Huang Song's failure, and even more so, it was the failure of Cheng Jing's subordinates. Yuan Chong did not understand, but he saw that Cheng Jing's complexion was much better. He should be fine, right? He asked someone to fetch a water skin from the carriage, then fetched a clean handkerchief and handed it to Cheng Jing. "Sir, wipe your sweat and drink some water to cool off. Judging by the weather, I'm afraid it'll be hot for a while." Cheng Jing took the handkerchief and was about to wipe away the sweat on his forehead when he heard a clamor for help coming from outside. What happened? Yuan Chong took advantage of his height to stand on tiptoe and take a look. It seems like there's a conflict between refugees. It was not accurate to say that there was a conflict between refugees. To be precise, There were a few male refugees who were impatient and wanted to take advantage of a woman who was alone. Naturally, the woman would not let it go. If she was caught by these people, even a fool would know what would happen to her. She bit someone and took advantage of the pain to run away. As she ran, she tried to find help. Seeing that there were many people on Qingjing's side and that there were dozens of strong guards in uniform standing guard, she mustered up her courage and ran over. Stop! 2 guards drew their swords and stopped the madly running woman. The woman's face was covered in tears as she knelt in a sorry state and begged the guards. Behind her, several madmen were still shouting and cursing. Qingjing was not far away. When he saw this scene, he frowned and looked rather displeased. Yuan Chong read Qingjing's mind and snorted, "What's with the ruckus?" The guards half knelt and begged for forgiveness. The woman was stunned. She took a few steps forward and tried to grab Yuan Chong's trousers. Save this little woman." Yuan Chong gestured for the guards to arrest the madman and said to the woman, "Madam, you're safe now." The woman wiped her face with her sleeve, revealing a disheveled but beautiful face. "Thank you, General, for saving me." The madmen were still shouting and cursing. Their mouths were not clean, so the guards secretly kicked them a few times. Yuan Chong was also angry. How could they dirty his master's ears with their filthy words? He was just about to send someone to kill these evil madmen when Qingjing said, "Forget it. Huan Shu, let them go." Yuan Chong did not understand. Qingjing was someone who could not tolerate sand in his eyes. How could he allow a few perverted people to live? Qingjing glanced at the miserable woman kneeling on the ground and sighed. "It's fine if you beat them up. They don't deserve death." The woman's tears, which had just stopped, streamed down her cheeks. Who wouldn't be sad? If these madmen were alive, she would definitely be targeted once they left Qingjing and the others. Qingjing lowered his eyes and said, "Hung Shu, let's go." Yuan Chong did not dare to disobey Qingjing's orders. He ordered his men to take the madmen to the side and beat them up before letting them go. Bah! The guards spat disdainfully as they looked at the madmen who were wailing like pigs being slaughtered. Animals! Qingjing entered the carriage. The caravan moved forward slowly again. This time, they had an extra tail. Yuan Chong wanted to chase her away, but the woman was afraid of running into the madmen and refused to leave. "Master, that woman is still following us." At this moment, Qingjing's cold voice came from the carriage. "Send someone to keep an eye on them." Yuan Chong was surprised. He looked back in disbelief and said in a low voice, "Master, that woman." Qingjing said concisely, "If there's a problem, don't make it public. See what she wants to do." Chapter 839. Yuan Chong accepted the order, but he still had some doubts. Why did the master feel that there was something strange about the woman? He blinked his eyes in confusion. His sharp and spirited eyes were filled with doubt. He looked at Qingjing with a pitiful expression. Qingjing didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the back of the convoy thoughtfully. That woman was still persistently following him. What was she planning? Qingjing put down the curtain and picked up the bamboo scroll he was halfway through reading. He quickly immersed himself in it and concentrated. Having received the order, Yuan Chong didn't dare to underestimate the little tail following behind them. No matter how hard he racked his brain, he couldn't find any flaws. He didn't know why Master Qingjing would suspect her at first sight. Yuan Chong stared at her for a while and thought to himself, "No matter how I look at her, she doesn't look like a threatening woman. Her lower body is unstable when she walks, her breathing is rapid, and her hands don't show any signs of martial arts training. Could the master be mistaken?" Of course, he didn't have the guts to voice his doubts. After all, Qingjing relied on his brain to make a living. If his IQ was lower than Yuan Chong's, he wouldn't be considered a counselor. Could it be that the woman was hiding too much? Yuan Chong rode on the back of the horse, his right hand pressing on the hilt of his knife. He seemed to be swaying his head along with the horse's hooves, but he was actually on high alert. He stayed close to Qingjing, keeping a distance from him and paying attention to the woman at the back of the convoy. The woman didn't know that she was being suspected. She didn't even hear the conversation between Qing Jing and Yuan Chong. 10 feet was about 34 meters. An ordinary person would barely hear anything from that distance, even if they spoke loudly. But for a peerless master, like the woman, who had sharp senses, it was a piece of cake. It was a pity that although she had peerless martial arts, it was learned through a skill book. The skill book could make her a martial arts master with rich combat experience. There was no doubt about that. However, she still lacked the basic qualities and habits of a martial artist. A real martial artist would always be vigilant at all times. It wasn't a deliberate action, but a habit, like Jiang Pingji. As for the woman in front of him, she had peerless martial arts. If she met someone at the same level as her, she would still be defeated. She stepped on a piece of gravel and slipped, almost twisting to the ground. She cried out in pain. Her voice was faint and soft, as if she was sobbing and moaning. It touched the softest part of her heart. When Yuan Chong heard this sound, his body stiffened and he unnaturally tightened his grip on the horse's belly. If he was already like this, the other ordinary guards were even more shameful. "Madam, can you not follow us?" This is the pass to Wanzhou, and those madmen have been beaten up, so they probably won't bully you again. Yuan Chong rode forward and lashed the horse whip in his hand on the shoulders of a few guards. They cried out in pain and took 2 steps forward with an unnatural expression, as if there were some jackals, wolves, tigers, or leopards chasing after them. Oh my God, that sound was too seductive. The woman sat paralyzed on the ground. Her hair fell to the side of her face, making her palm-sized face look even more pitiful. Her watery eyes seemed to be able to drown people. "But, General, this little woman," the woman stammered, unable to speak. She twisted her fingers and sleeves nervously. Her eyes were red and misty. She was probably frightened. It wasn't easy for her to find a sense of security, but she was driven away by a fiendish martial artist. She looked very pitiful. Yuan Chong said, "Madam, we are entering the pass to visit our relatives. It's not convenient for you to follow us." What needed to be said had been said, but the woman still refused to leave. Of course, she couldn't leave. She had used a few pieces of silver to hire the madman to put on a show. If she didn't achieve her goal, wouldn't she lose a lot? At first, Yuan Chong couldn't detect anything wrong with the woman, but after repeatedly driving her away, she still refused to leave. He became suspicious. The woman was none other than the woman who had been targeted by Jiang Pingji earlier. The woman was full of confidence, but it was not without reason. If she hadn't met people like Jiang Pingji or Cheng Jing who were meticulous in their observation, the possibility of the woman getting away with it was very high. Even with Jiang Pingji's harsh qualifications, she could give the woman's disguise a score of 60 points. It was naturally difficult for ordinary people to see through it. For example, Yuan Chong didn't notice anything wrong at first. However, a perfect disguise not only required a flawless appearance, but also superb acting skills and thorough details. No matter which part of the disguise was slightly flawed, it was very easy to expose one's identity. The woman had learned her lesson a few times before. She had put a lot of effort into disguising herself. There was nothing wrong with that. The problem was that she had chosen the wrong place and time, which was why Qing Jing had seen through her disguise. Now that they were about to enter Wanzhou's checkpoint, there were soldiers outside to maintain order. Which refugee would be so bold as to chase after a good-looking woman with the intention of raping her? Don't forget, the magistrate of Wanzhou was a woman. Would she allow such a thing to happen at the border of Wanzhou? Was a momentary lust for beauty more important, or was her own life more important? When Yuan Chong said he wanted to hack the madman to death, the madman's reactions were very interesting. Cheng Jing wasn't blind, so how could he not see it? Apart from that, the woman's eyes and temperament were also failures. She didn't have the confusion and numbness that an ordinary refugee should have. For a woman to be able to escape from Wulong County to Wanzhou, she must be very wary of the outside world. She wouldn't easily reveal her true appearance. But what did the woman do after escaping danger? She used her sleeve to wipe her face, revealing a disheveled but beautiful face. Was this reasonable? Flaws like this were everywhere. If one was a little careless, they would overlook it. But Qing Jing wasn't that kind of careless. Mr. Qing, we can't get rid of her. It seems like she's latching onto us. I sent someone to keep an eye on her, and her reaction was interesting. It's like she came from that kind of place. Yuan Chong lowered his voice to the window. He paused mid-sentence and swallowed the rest of his words. His master was a bright moon in his arms. How could he dirty his ears with such vulgar words? Cheng Jing put the bamboo slip in his hand aside, straightened his slightly wrinkled sleeves, and said thoughtfully, "Forget it. When we enter the pass, we'll send her away." Although he was suspicious, this was still Lu Shi's territory. Cheng Jing couldn't figure out the woman's intentions, and he was afraid that she was from Wanzhou. It wouldn't be good to kill her. To avoid trouble, it was better to be cautious. There were too many refugees waiting in line outside the pass. They waited until sunset before they were allowed to enter. Yuan Chong sent the woman away according to Qing Jing's instructions. She sobbed and limped away. The moon was high in the sky. The convoy had no choice but to sleep outside. Qing Jing always had a regular schedule. Even if the conditions were bad, he could still fall asleep on time. He closed the curtains and took off his outer robe. Just as he was about to sleep, there was an unfamiliar fragrance in the carriage. Cheng Jing suddenly opened his eyes, drew the scholar's sword he wore, and stabbed it at the source of the fragrance. Heng Shu. Chapter 840. Sir, Yuan Chong, who was in a light sleep, heard the commotion and hurriedly jumped into the carriage. He found Qing Jing in his undergarments, curled up with a pained expression. Sir. Don't make a sound, Qing Jing interrupted Yuan Chong, breathing heavily. In no time, his forehead was covered in sweat, sliding down his cheeks and neck to his collarbone. Yuan Chong did not dare to disobey Qing Jing. Suppressing his panic, he turned around and got out of the carriage, driving away the guards who had rushed over. Everyone keep up the vigil. Don't let go of any suspicious person. After doing this, he hurriedly returned to the carriage. By then, Qing Jing had barely recovered his kneeling position, but his face was still very pale. Sir, what happened? Yuan Chong half knelt on the ground, eager to help the swaying Qing Jing. However, just as his hand reached out, Qing Jing pushed it away. It was at this moment that Yuan Chong noticed a large patch of black marks crawling over Qing Jing's right hand. Sir. Qing Jing's face was flushed, his breathing heavier and heavier. His cheeks were slightly swollen from exertion, and he looked to be in great pain. I'm fine. Pushing Yuan Chong away, Qing Jing took a moment to suppress the heart-wrenching pain. The fine veins that covered his eyes gradually faded. Heng Shu, when you came in just now, did you see anyone suspicious? Qing Jing found it difficult to speak. He had to pant heavily to say 2 words, and even when he did, his speech was somewhat slurred. How could Yuan Chong remain calm when he saw Qing Jing in this state? He looked around in panic, carefully searching through his memories, but did not see the suspicious person that Qing Jing mentioned. From the moment Qing Jing called out his name to the moment he rushed into the carriage, only a breath or 2 had passed. With such a short interval, unless it was a demon or ghost, it was impossible for an ordinary person to fly away under his nose. No, I was keeping watch outside just now, but I didn't see any suspicious figures. After saying this, Yuan Chong saw Qing Jing's unsheathed sword beside him, the blade still stained with fresh blood. Sir, you're injured? No wonder Qing Jing was in so much pain. Qing Jing raised his right hand, his wide sleeve sliding down to his elbow, revealing most of his fair arm. Yuan Chong stared at Qing Jing's arm and his scalp went numb. He saw a mass of something that looked like thick ink wriggling on Qing Jing's arm. At first, it was only a small piece, but it soon became a large piece. He had never seen such a fantastical scene before. Could it be the mister who was injured by demons? Yuan Chong was so anxious that his cheeks were flushed, and his back was covered in cold sweat. Qing Jing said, I don't talk about strange powers and gods. Don't spout nonsense. If he was a demon, how could I have hurt him so easily? After saying that, he looked at the sword beside him with a solemn expression. The sharp blade was still stained with blood that was gradually darkening. Yuan Chong was surprised, and the way he looked at Qingjing changed. Scholars practiced the 6 arts of the nobleman: etiquette, music, archery, imperial strategy, calligraphy, and mathematics. To them, carrying a sword was more ornamental than practical. To scholars, the significance of a sword was the same as jewelry to women. However, this didn't mean that they couldn't fight. In fact, those scholars who could roam outside were all capable of both literature and martial arts. They might not be able to defeat generals, but they had no problem dealing with ordinary people. Yuan Chong calmed himself down and asked, "Mister, do you feel any discomfort?" "My head hurts a little, but it's nothing serious. I stabbed that assassin." "Get someone to follow the blood trail." Qingjing raised his hand and pulled down his sleeve, covering the ugly, strange, jet-black mark. Recalling the fragrance of cosmetics, the woman he saw during the day floated into his mind, and he became more vigilant. "Mister's hand. Do you want to find a doctor to take a look?" Seeing Qingjing's calm reaction, Yuan Chong's panic that was growing like a vine in his heart also diminished. Someone who could be injured by Qingjing naturally couldn't be a demon. Since it wasn't a demon, there was no need to be afraid. Perhaps there was a traitor in the convoy, and the two of them worked together, so Yuan Chong didn't notice any suspicious person in his panic? Not for now. Qingjing's expression was solemn, and he waved his hand weakly. "That person will come back. Increase the patrols." Qingjing was injured in front of Yuan Chong's eyes. This was a great humiliation to him. However, he couldn't let the same thing happen a second time. Yuan Chong said firmly, "Yes, don't worry, mister. I will definitely guard this place to the death and not let any suspicious person escape." This night was destined to not be peaceful. Yuan Chong didn't dare to sleep, and the other guards didn't dare to let their guard down. In the latter half of the night, Qingjing was so tired that he couldn't help but close his eyes to take a nap. If it was any other day, Qingjing would have a dreamless night until dawn, but today was different. Dreams came one after another. Rather than calling them dreams, they were more like memories of childhood, adolescence, and youth. Most of them were experiences that left a deep impression on him. However, Qingjing felt that the dreams were a little strange. For no reason, there was an unknown person beside him. Who was this person? In the dream, Qingjing was puzzled. Looking at the figure, it should be a woman. A fragrant wind lingered around her, and her footsteps swayed gracefully. An ethereal voice rang in his ears. She's your lord, your benefactor, your best friend. She's someone you can never betray." Qingjing was sleeping soundly, but his brows were furrowed, and he kept resisting the voice in his heart. What nonsense! When the carriage was filled with a hazy light, Qingjing slowly woke up, and his 5 senses gradually returned to him. Just as he was about to get up, his head felt like it was going to explode. "Heng Shu!" he called out. In the next second, the curtain of the carriage was lifted, and Yuan Chong bent down to enter. "Any news?" Yuan Chong knew what Qingjing was asking about, and he said guiltily, "I'm ashamed, and I've learned something." "Forget it. After a short rest, we'll continue our journey." Qingjing's brows were furrowed, and his fingers subconsciously rubbed his temples. He said hoarsely, "Finish this as soon as possible, so that the Lord doesn't have to wait for too long." "She's your lord, your benefactor, your best friend. She's someone you can never betray." Not only in his dreams, but even when he was awake, the voice rang in his ears like a ghost. Qingjing didn't tell Yuan Chong about these details. Instead, he stared at the mark on his right hand, and there was a hint of ruthlessness in his eyes. On the other side, the person who had been stabbed by Qingjing was also full of anxiety. Because Qingjing was a scholar, his sword was always sheathed at his waist. She had been careless for a moment, and did not expect Qingjing to be so vigilant, stabbing her without warning. Fortunately, she had the system portable space and escaped quickly, or else she would have been caught red-handed. System, the loyalty talisman should have been planted, right? The system said, the planting was successful, but Qingjing is tenacious and cautious, so the loyalty talisman can't take effect immediately. We can only slowly grind it out. Ordinary people lacked judgment and were easily deceived. This loyalty talisman usually took effect immediately when used on them. If they encountered someone with a high IQ, the success rate would plummet to less than half. Chapter 841. Since that night, Qing Jing and the others had not encountered any other disturbances, but Yuan Chang's frown had not disappeared. He found that Qing Jing's complexion was getting more and more haggard by the day. Recently, he had even been a little absent-minded. Every time he asked, the other always said he was fine, but Yuan Chong always felt uneasy. He felt that his master was probably being haunted by something evil. But every time he said that, he would always be met with comments like, "Men don't speak of strange powers," which made Yuan Chong feel depressed. In the blink of an eye, it was mid-June. Along the way, Qing Jing and the others saw the new atmosphere of Wanzhou in full swing and could not help but feel emotional. Yuan Chong said, "Although the magistrate of Wanzhou is a woman, she is governing the county well." The north had suffered from war and there were many refugees. Last year, there had been a drought for several months. It should have been very bleak, but what they saw was completely different from what they had imagined. Many people worked hard in the fields. The cultivated fields were scattered in picturesque disorder, presenting a peaceful atmosphere. Qing Jing did not say anything. In his opinion, as a ruler, governing the people and treating his subordinates depended on one's ability. It had nothing to do with gender. Not long after Qing Jing and the others entered Wanzhou, Jiang Pingji found out. When they arrived, she was already ready to welcome them. "Master, you say this is really Xiangyang district? I can't tell at all. If you say this is Shangjing, some people will believe you. Master, you said that Lu Shi is the magistrate of Wanzhou. Why is he here instead of staying in the prefecture?" As the saying goes, clothes make the man, while horses make the saddle. Yuan Chong, this tall and sturdy man, changed out of his coarse hemp clothes and put on a fine silk robe. He looked a bit more noble and less boorish. He chattered in Qing Jing's ear, his power comparable to dozens of ducks. Qing Jing frowned. "Silence." As soon as he said that, Yuan Chong stopped talking as if his mouth had been sewn shut. He watched Qing Jing walk past him, a bit of worry appearing in the depths of his eyes. Recently, Qing Jing's temper had been rising. He was still elegant and dignified, but his temperament had become gloomy and violent. What puzzled Yuan Chong was that they had met the woman a few days ago, but this time, Qing Jing had asked her to stay. It was too strange. What worried him more was the master's hand. The black lines on his right hand had not disappeared. The teacher's temper seemed to have worsened from that night. Yuan Chong watched as Qing Jing walked away. He turned to the guard and asked, "Did that woman do anything strange today?" The guard also lowered his voice and said, "That woman is very obedient. There's nothing noteworthy about her." Yuan Chong suppressed his impatience and hurriedly followed Qing Jing's footsteps. Qing Jing and his party were envoys representing Huang Song's forces, so Wanzhou did not dare to slight them. This was the first time the transmigrator had visited Wanzhou. She glanced at the surrounding buildings with disdain and muttered to herself, "Country bumpkin." It was only after she disparaged the buildings in Xiangyang district that she stopped talking, feeling like she hadn't had enough. The system poured cold water on her. "Don't get carried away. This is Lu Shi's territory." The transmigrator lowered her eyebrows in displeasure and muttered. She was hit by the grade 9 loyalty talisman, and the talisman was imprinted on her hand. The system said, the talisman was indeed in Lu Shi's hands, but Lu Shi is similar to Qing Jing, so he has a certain resistance to the loyalty talisman. The time traveler proudly said, "So what if you have resistance?" Qing Jing is also very powerful, but he was still controlled by the loyalty talisman. If she wasn't controlled by the loyalty talisman, why would Qing Jing accept her and let her follow the convoy? Lu Shi was hit by the grade 9 loyalty talisman, and it was the highest quality, orange. There was no way he could escape the fate of becoming a puppet. As long as I activate the incantation of the grade 9 loyalty talisman in front of Lu Shi, she can live or die if I want her to. The system was about to refute. It felt that Lu Shi was not easy to deal with. However, the grade 9 loyalty talisman was indeed powerful. It should be able to control her. Forget it. Just be careful, lest you fail miserably. The system sighed. It was now counting on its host to turn the tables and hoped that this operation would be successful. The products of the system are always of the highest quality. I have confidence in you. The time traveler patted the system on its back. The system felt bitter but could not speak. The host had confidence, but it did not. It had suffered a few setbacks at the hands of Jiang Pingji, the evil opponent, and it still had lingering fears. Cheng Jing was Huang Song's messenger, and Huang Song and Jiang Pingji were good friends. Jiang Pingji had to meet him personally. I hope you have been well since we parted ways in Qinzhou, Yumo. May I know the reason for your visit today? Jiang Pingji's attire was more formal than usual. She sat at the head of the table with a dignified air. Cheng Jing bowed and said, "My lord heard that you broke through Jimin Pass, crushed the emperor's morale, and boosted the court's prestige. He sent me to congratulate you with a generous gift." Jiang Pingji looked at Cheng Jing with a smile and said, "It's just a small matter. I'm really sorry that Bogeo had to send a gift. Besides, Bogeo and I are best friends, and I've admired your talent for a long time. Now that we've met, we don't have to be so serious." Her eyes fell on Cheng Jing's right hand, but she quickly looked away. Cheng Jing said, "Etiquette cannot be ignored." "I'll feel uncomfortable if you're always so restrained," Jiang Pingji said. "What's wrong with your hand?" Cheng Jing's right hand was covered in black lines. To avoid looking unsightly, he wrapped it with a white strip of cloth. Hearing Jiang Pingji mention his right hand, Cheng Jing subconsciously covered the back of his right hand with his left. "I accidentally hurt the back of my hand. Thank you for your concern. Mister's painting skills are peerless, you should be more careful. I have some good scar-removing medicine here. Why don't you take some back?" Cheng Jing thanked him. After the small talk, Cheng Jing quietly changed the topic to the Battle of Jimin Pass. The general who guarded the pass was Fu Wang, the top general of the Mengs in Sangzhou. It was unexpected that such a majestic and ever-victorious general had been defeated by Jiang Pingji. There were reports of the battle, but the details were not complete. It was better to ask the person in question. The Battle of Jimin Pass was over, and Jiang Pingji had no secrets. She answered Cheng Jing's questions. She knew why Cheng Jing was here, so she let him lead the conversation. Before long, Cheng Jing mentioned the forces in Wulong County that had been destroyed by Fu Wang. "I heard that the Wulong County chief's orphan was rescued by you?" Cheng Jing sounded like he was asking, but he was sure of it. "The orphan of County Chief Kai is with me. I remember the child was called Kai Xiang. Why did Yumo bring him up?" Cheng Jing sighed. "You may not know this, but ever since County Chief Kai sacrificed his life for the country, Wulong County has been in chaos. There's no leader, and there's been internal strife. Some people even rebelled. The people are so anxious that they had to move their families to seek refuge. On the way from Haozhou, I saw countless people from Wulong County travel thousands of miles to Wanzhou in search of a place to live. It's their fortune that you're willing to take them in, but the journey is dangerous and there are many bandits along the way. Many people have fallen victim to them. It's a pity." Jiang Pingji knew that the refugees from Wulong County had come to Wanzhou, but she couldn't show it. She pretended to be surprised. "Is that true? Xiaoyu, why didn't you tell me?" Su Ku, the professional scapegoat, was speechless. "Please don't drag me into the act, okay?" However, as a subordinate, he had to share his lord's worries. He could only silently take the blame and apologize. Chapter 842. Jiang Pingji said shamefully, "I took Kai Xiang in with good intentions. I didn't expect it to backfire and bring disaster to Wulong County." She pretended to reproach herself. Of course, everyone present was smart enough to know that she was just being polite. Kai County Chief's power was almost destroyed. He only had a few dozen confidants and an 11-year-old boy left. What could they do? If Jiang Pingji didn't take him in, even if Kai Xiang and the others could return to Wulong County, they would only be cannon fodder. If he stayed in Jiang Pingji's territory, he could at least keep his life. Qing Jing said, "You're kind and generous. You protected the only bloodline of Kai County Chief. I heard that Kai Xiang was the only child that Kai County Chief had found when he was in his middle years. If Kai County Chief could see you in heaven, he would be grateful to you. However, the situation in Wulong County is getting worse and the people are suffering. If Kai Xiang could go back and take charge, he might be able to help." Cheng Jing's words were exactly what Jiang Pingji wanted. On the surface, she frowned as if she was considering Cheng Jing's suggestion. After a while, she said, "Yumo, I've thought about it. A few days ago, Kai Xiang sent someone to complain to me. He said that he dreamed of his father and his hometown. The child was only 11 years old, but he suffered such a misfortune. It was heartbreaking. However, Kai Xiang only has a few dozen confidants. If he goes to Wulong County with such a small number of people, wouldn't he fall into the hands of evil people?" Cheng Jing's eyelids twitched when he heard the last sentence. Jiang Pengji was scolding him indirectly. He pretended not to understand. His expression remained the same, and no one could see any flaws in his act. Cheng Jing suggested, "I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it." "Yumo, you and I are old friends. What can't we talk about?" Jiang Pingji didn't put on the airs of a governor. Instead, she acted as if she was receiving a friend. Her attitude was casual but not rude. Cheng Jing closed his eyes and nodded slightly. "Why don't you lend some troops to Kai Xiang and help him quell the rebellion?" His words sounded like he was considering for Jiang Pingji, but in fact, it was a test. He conveniently blocked her way out. Jiang Pingji saved County Chief Kai's orphan and earned the reputation of being kind and generous. If they were to use this as an excuse to encroach on Wulong County, wouldn't that be bullying an orphan with no one to rely on? If she were to swallow her pride and help Kai Xiang stabilize Wulong County, then withdraw her army and be a selfless Lei Feng, handing over a piece of fat meat, the outside world would praise her to the heavens, saying that she was a model of kindness and loyalty, and would want nothing more than to give her silk banners. Only a fool would do such a thing if he were to contribute manpower, money, and effort. Jiang Pingji thought to herself, "I don't mind borrowing troops, but I'm afraid of rumors spreading that I'm trying to encroach on Wulong County and bully the widows." It was really hard to explain. But if we ignore it, the people of Wulong County will continue to suffer. I can't bear to do that. Cheng Jing understood Jiang Pingji's hint and could not help but feel happy. As long as she was not interested in Wulong County, then the most suitable person to take over Wulong County was Huang Song. What Cheng Jing needed to do now was to recommend Huang Song to Jiang Pingji. Of course, both sides were well aware that Wulong County was not a piece of fat meat for free. If he wanted Jiang Pingji to relent and give up this benefit, he had to offer something else in exchange. What followed was a tug-of-war of negotiation. Jiang Pingji tested Cheng Jing's bottom line step by step, while Cheng Jing tried his best to fight for Huang Song's benefit. To put it simply, Kai Xiang was a commodity in Jiang Pingji's hands. She wanted to sell him for a high price, and Cheng Jing was representing the buyer, Huang Song. Naturally, they had to lower the price. As for what Kai Xiang, the commodity, thought, that was not within their scope of consideration. Jiang Pingji kept the live stream open, and the audience listened to the two of them haggle back and forth. Although their words were reserved, their meaning was the same. The more the audience listened, the more their worldview shattered. Bao Bao Xingku, I have a question. When the streamer and Cheng Jing traded Kai Xiang, did Kai Xiang's father know? Terminal obsessive-compulsive disorder patient. Kai Xiang's father was hacked to death by Fu Wang a long time ago. How would he know? Wuxia and Xianxia, I sympathize with Kai Xiang. He's only 11 years old. In our world, he's still in the 6th grade. But considering the streamer's world background, 11 years old is already a sensible age. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame Kai Xiang for being born in the wrong era and being born in the wrong body. He has no ability, no one to rely on, and can only be at the mercy of others without any ability to resist. Zenmodo, the previous poster is too emotional. Things aren't that bad. Huang Song just wants to use Kai Xiang as a puppet to legitimately take over Wulong County. After the deed is done, he probably won't make things difficult for Kai Xiang. After all, Huang Song is also a person who cares about his reputation. In order to shut the mouths of the public, he won't kill Kai Xiang. What's so difficult about rewarding him with a meal? At most, his standard of living will not be as good as before. Zhou Tsua Gong Shou, I'll give the previous poster a like. You've spoken my mind. Kai Xiang has lost his father and protection. If Wulong County is in his hands, even if Huang Song doesn't take it from him, it'll be taken by someone else. Although this is not the right thing to say, it's a chaotic world that only cares about strength and not feelings. Wulong County is a hot potato for Kai Xiang. If he doesn't move, he'll get himself killed sooner or later. Baobao, sigh. Kai Xiang is being sold off by the black-hearted streamer. Although both sides are well aware of the situation, some things can't be said too openly. At the very least, there needs to be a cover. For example, in this transaction of Kai Xiang, Jiang Pingji and Qing Jing stood on the moral high ground. With the people of Wulong County as the starting point, they let Kai Xiang go back to take charge of the overall situation and stabilize the situation. It was definitely not for the benefit of Wanzhou and Huang Song. After some probing, Jiang Pingji had more or less figured out the ins and outs of Huang Song's side. Qing Jing also calculated Jiang Pingji's bottom line. Huang Song knew Jiang Pingji's temperament. This time, he was prepared to bleed a lot. The conditions he offered were quite generous. It was a win-win situation. The negotiation process was quite pleasant, and both sides enjoyed themselves to the fullest. After negotiating a big deal, Jiang Pingji happily set up a banquet to welcome Qing Jing. By the way, have you met any strange people recently? Jiang Pingji suddenly asked. Qing Jing's heart skipped a beat, but his expression did not change. Why do you say that, magistrate? Jiang Pingji said casually, Zixiao is proficient in astronomical phenomena and can predict. A while ago, he wrote me a letter saying that an ominous purple cloud was drifting from the south to Wanzhou. The evil aura was getting stronger by the day, so it should be evil without a doubt. As the saying goes, demons are bound to appear in chaotic times. Although strange powers and gods can't be trusted, Zixiao is the person I trust the most. I'd rather believe what he says than not. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.